comes Ian, and we'll let Ian join in as well. Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, wherever you might be in the world. Let's move faces around here. I forgot to send everybody the link, which was just very average of me, as ever. But those that have arrived. So here we are, another day, another dog. We wait just to see if Bobby.
We've got a temporal loop.
Have we? What's that mean? Is it all going horribly wrong already?
I can't hear it.
Was it in number one in the hit parade? I'm not following that at all.
I have no idea what he's talking about.
No, nor do I. Right. Let's just ignore him. It's best just to ignore him. Not Hack Hamlin there is Go on, mate.
The crowd is gathering.
The crowd is gathering.
Yes. Someone's off meds.
Definitely. That's how I feel today. I absolutely feel today's been a crazy day. So it does feel like lots of meds have been taken or not taken or whatever. Anyway, let's crack on. Ian is joining us to speak about the most excellent, and just once in a while, I actually do have the Airprox Reality Check webpage ready to go and show. But whilst I'm finding it out, Ian, what on earth is that, and why is it important? And everyone knows there was a drone at Gatwick, so what on earth are they talking about?
Yeah, so anyway, as you know from when I've been on here in the past, I do nothing but prat on about Gatwick. But given a lot of facts have been collected over time, they've never really been in one place, so they're kind of scattered all over the place. And there's still not everything there yet, but there's a good chunk of it. So really what this is doing is it's a single page. So I reached out to Simon Dale of Airprox Reality Check and said, could I put all the Gatwick links on his website? And he was cool, because it seems a good fit, because obviously that website sort of debunks poor data in the form of a lot of the Airprox reports where there's on occasion there's sort of physics involved that would be impossible with a drone, and obviously they do good things with highlighting that. So here is a page on Gatwick, and it's tried to be accessible so that people don't really know what's been uncovered over time. They can understand it, and they can understand the sort of context behind what was going on, because there was as you see actually in front of us at the minute, there was a timeline released in the Trebor debrief, and it's kind of funny because they absolutely just redacted the document to pieces, to smithereens. It was just like someone had got a paintbrush and just gone straight across it, and yet this was more or less intact. So really the only bits that are in black on here are to do with the counter UAS, and you can already piece that together because of the good fortune of the fact that Eddie Mitchell was live tweeting his photos as he was going round. So we know when these things are actually deployed. So what I've done here is I've annotated it so we can see when the counter drone has arrived. It revealed other stuff as well, because they've got all the times in there now. It turns out the Gatwick drone was only ever seen after sunset, which straight away tells you, oh, wait a minute, it must have been lights. It also shows that when the counter UAS turned up, there's clearly either a lack of trust in it, or there's been some sort of debate that's gone on, and the visual sightings have been allowed to override it. So it's like, what is the point in bringing in assets if you're not actually then going to pay attention to them? So it really there's the implication there that Gatwick was closed a day longer than it needed to be. And And it also shows really the moment the pennies dropped, with having the counter drone there, and that every time there's a sighting, they realise it doesn't show in any of the counter drone systems, and every time they deliberately fly a drone, it is picked up on the counter drone systems. That the penny dropped, and as soon as that happened, it was like, whew, everyone vanishes. The whole operations wound down, and then it's been made out ever since that the visual sightings didn't continue on, and it was a case of we went down there, we scared the drone off, and everybody went home and hurrah for us all. But that isn't the case at all. The sightings went on for days afterwards. So, but by the 21st, basically the penny dropped. They realised that these sightings aren't credible, and then they actually get to the point where the aircraft are flying in and out of Gatwick while the people are saying, I'm seeing the drone. So you've only got two things you can say there. It's either they deliberately endangered passengers and put their lives at risk knowing this drone was flying about, or they don't trust the sightings. And if you don't trust the sightings, which is clearly the case, then you can't say, oh, well, for the first few days they were valid and the rest of it they're not. That's, it's just utter nonsense. So it does show, you can see actions speak louder than words, and those actions are documented in there in black and white. And it also shows at least one police officer to have been telling porcupines, because before this went out, he's on the record saying that, once it got, there was only like sightings for like the first couple of days. But it's clearly not the case.
Yeah, well done in compiling and all this and getting it on record in one place. As you say, it needed to be done. And unfortunately, excuse me, all of us are going to be saddled with this tale for the next forever 100 million years. Sadly, it's in the narrative. It's written everywhere as being true, and there's not a lot we can do to fight that, I suppose. Now, and we must welcome Bobby. Bobby has arrived. He is the director. I've got to read it because I've got to get this right. The director of business development at Autel. So thanks very much for joining us, Bobby. I hope you can hear us well and all that.
No, I can. Thanks for having me.
Perfect.
Hopefully you guys can hear me well. It's truly an honor. I've been actually been following Bruce for several years, and actually Nicola himself. I purchased several Zeo HD frames as a result of your videos, and mimics your setup. Been a big fan. There's, Painless 360, Philip, many others in the industry who, I feel very privileged to be talking with. So pleasure to connect with you folks. Funny you mentioned about Gatwick. I'm actually wearing my White Fox shirt. I used to work for White Fox Defense. We happen to make.
I've written that here. I've actually written that. That's you've had maximum preparation from me. I've actually written down. Yes.
With regards to counter drone, to your point, sir. My understanding, and I've heard actually from a number of people about the Gatwick situation. I actually don't know about the details in the same way, but I can tell you that the technology that is used to detect drones, some of it is remarkably sophisticated, some of it is not at all. And so, as you're probably aware, not to get like a primer, but there's different types of sensors. There's obviously RF type signal detection. There's cameras like optical detection, and then you have radar. Really, there's like your three ways of being able to detect a drone. I'm not an expert on radar, but objectively, White Fox happens to employ some people that are leading experts on radar and know some of their blind spots. Reality is it's hard for radar to determine if it's a bird, it's a multicopter, if it's a classic balloon or a bag of trash. It's very, very hard, which is why you need a camera paired with radar to then zoom in on what that signature to confirm or identify what that is. And RF is very helpful in the sense that good RF, and I should be fair with you, there's only a handful of those, they're calibrated to only detect known drone signals. And you have certain challenges where, as you're all probably aware, many commercial off-the-shelf drones, particularly less expensive ones, are Wi-Fi enabled. So their signature is the same of a Wi-Fi router. And conversely, because of how similar they are, you do get certain companies have huge difficulty differentiating between a drone and a router. And you do get false positives. And some of these false positives, I am afraid, lead to presumptions about the concerns about drones. So I've spoken to Philip. Philip has, as you're all probably aware, very strong opinions on counter drone technology, and is extraordinarily educated kind of on the technical aspects of how a piece of hardware is able to detect and mitigate a drone, right? And the type of access you would need. And my own opinion, and this is a little bit different, is that counter drone technology, the tolerance, the appeal, is very geographically disparate. I mean, I live in a country where most people own arms, for example, right? The perception of threat in the United States is very different than the perception of threat in other parts of the world. So you have many companies, in my opinion, in the counter drone space that don't do a good job of detecting, identifying, let alone mitigating a threat. You have a huge amount of expense being sent to kinetic kill. I mean, you have, and these are largely at the expense of taxpayer dollars. There's no, besides the VC funds going into the companies, there's not as much private money going to counter drone that has enabled mitigation. Most of it's all around detect and identify. And most people are unaware of this, but like DJI drones actually self-identify themselves. And DJI sells their own counter drone equipment to detect those very specific airframes. And so if DJI happens to own 80% plus of the market, it happens to make sense for you. Yeah, people, you're going to use an aeroscope. Patrick is right. And this, in my opinion, is all going to change. And there's going to be a bit of a disruption in counter UAS once remote ID comes out, or broadcast remote ID in the United States, because the signals that then everyone's detecting in many ways are standardized. You have millions of drones that people will either refuse to add some sort of beacon to, or will be unable to be updated through a firmware update to give out this information, which is, again, there's legitimate need for counter drone equipment, in my opinion. I mean, it's just that the perception of threat, and I'll give an example. I'm born in the United States. My parents are from Iran. And throughout most of my life, particularly after 9/11, I've had to articulate to people that, like, I'm not an Arab, and that my father's an engineer, my mother's an educator, like, we're Americans, right? And this burden is, I feel, similar to the sense of, again, a misrepresentation of drones and how they're being operated, because the majority of people who operate drones, to quote Luke Fox, of White Fox, they're clueless and careless. They're not criminal operators, right? And Bruce's facial expression says it all, because, and again, like, Nicola, I know you live in a part of the world where, airspace is managed differently, for example, right? And to be fair, like, some of your content, like, has inspired me to, engineer airframes that can fly further and longer and faster, and maybe higher altitudes, et cetera. And again, for the number of these products and airframes that operate are like substantially orders of magnitude smaller than manned aviation. And if you talk to manned aviation pilots, like, the threat of a drone crashing into, with the exception of being ingested into a motor, they're not really that worried about it. Like, there were some folks, when I worked at White Fox, I was flying a drone in San Luis Obispo in, approved airspace, and it happens to be very close to some airfields, and I could hear the roar of a helicopter, but I couldn't see it. And so I ended up descending, and fortunately the drone I had ADS-B, so it warned me. But I noticed it was like a Super Stallion aircraft. One of my colleagues had worked on that airframe, and I was like, hey man, like, if I didn't dodge out of the way, what would happen? It's like, nothing. These people have sapphire infused cockpits. They can take, like, bullet rounds. You think that a Mavic Air 2 is going to cause some sort of problem? But again, if it gets into one of the intakes, it can cause some electrical issues. They obviously have, or an engine failure, which, again, there's a threat associated with it. But then he also mentioned birds pose the same threat. I can't tell you how many aircraft have come down as a result of ingesting a swan at 29,000 feet that you'd never had imagined they'd be flying that high. It's a problem that manned aviation has had for a while. My own opinion about counter drone technology is that there's definitely a need for it, particularly outside of the United States, in theaters of war, to be transparent. But it being something that everybody may need, I have a different opinion on that. It's the same reason why I don't think everybody needs, like, a enterprise grade server in their home. Yeah, Google Fiber, it's more than enough.
It's worth knowing. I mean, at Gatwick, it's had all the flavors, because obviously this it was on the second day, so it's quite early on. Aeroscope was there, and obviously we know that only detects DJI, which you would still, if you were looking at the chances, if there was somebody there that was just being daft, for example, the chances are they're probably more likely to have had something like a DJI equipment, because that's easier to buy off the shelf. So you can understand the logic of that. But by the evening, they've got a Skyperion, which had already been tested at a London airport, and that uses RF, and I think it might have other sensors as well. They must have been happy with that, because that's now part of the Gatwick solution. So it's Skyperion combined with Ords. They had Leonardo Falcon Shield there, which has radar, and it has optical with thermal that can see. And they've even got a demo of it, which is quite cool. Shows you quite clearly it detecting and tracking a Phantom 4 at 1 kilometre away, which is, this is where it always kind of funny, and where it, again, on the website, we look at some of those issues, is the Chief Constable of Sussex Police went to a parliamentary committee, and he was saying essentially that they were seeing with their eyes at night drones half a mile away. Well, that's complete nonsense. The LEDs on a drone, you wouldn't even see them after a couple of 100 meters. So you're definitely not seeing lights on a drone at that distance. You're also not able to say you're seeing a drone because it's too far away. But his argument was, well, we knew it was a drone. It was half a mile away. And he's then going to say you can't film that on a camera. Well, that's complete nonsense, because people were there. There was the press there with 400mm zooms, high ISO bodies, and so on. And even with your camera phone, you would have still had something, even though it might not have been all that clear. But yeah, he said essentially it was impossible to have filmed it with anything, and then didn't even mention that they had the equipment on the roof whilst these sightings were continuing, that could have taken the photographic evidence of it. And every time they put up a drone to test it with, it locked on and recorded that. So that's how it is daft. But it's, I mean, as far as counter drone, we're happy. Every airport could have it. We'd love every airport to have it, because then they can stop all the nonsense. We don't have to hear, oh, there's a drone being flown near the airport, because straight away they can be straight down to the owner and telling them off, and it won't happen again. Which is one of the funny things when you see it on social media. You'll see an airport saying, oh, there's someone being flying a drone not so far away for the airport. And then you can challenge the airports now, and you can say, don't you value your own passengers enough to invest in a counter drone system, given, like if we're talking about Aeroscope, it's somewhere around about £15,000. So you don't have to have a huge investment to have some counter drone there. And then you've got like Newcastle Airport that has it seems to be a fairly fancy counter drone system, and they've got like half the passengers of, say, Glasgow Airport, which was one of the airports that was on social media complaining about drone owners. So there's definitely a disparity. And now, post Gatwick, it's a fair question to say to them all, why haven't you got counter drone? Haven't you learned any lessons? And it seems really we haven't learned any lessons, or it's all down to the finances of it all. But really, for the drone community, we're better to have it, because then there can't be all the drama. But it's really proven when you look at the timeline that really the odds are it was just a completely faffed. I mean, I don't want to blame the police with it, because I think really the airport is ultimately culpable for it. But really, where the police fell down is when Tingley said, "Look, there might not be a drone," and then they got rid of him, and they decided that they were going to, dig themselves into a deep hole. At that point, the police have, they've essentially taken ownership of the mess, because they're saying, "Well, we're going to run with this narrative that looks, after each freedom of information, the narrative just looks more and more shaky."
It'd have to be hand, wasn't it? Sorry, Bobby, but it was.
No, you brought up a good point about the pricing. The £15,000. I mean, my understanding is a lot of the counter drone solutions that are used at Gatwick, like the Leonardo, the Thales, even was it Light Eyes Odds, they're all north of $1 million US. Very expensive. And again, in my opinion, I do believe that tiered solutions are far and away the best. There's just this idea of, is it overkill or is it not? I make the analogy of, all right, so RF, in my opinion, is actually some of the safest because it has the least amount of collateral damage. And if you can detect a pilot and you can detect the airframe, you can send an interdiction force to tell somebody, hey man, knock it off. And that interaction with that pilot is actually sometimes like the most effective, because then Ergo has, just to clarify, James, like counter drone is both detection, identification, and mitigation. It's kind of like an umbrella term, right? So if you're able to detect and identify where a pilot is and or an airframe, you're able to then do some sort of mitigation of your own. Send an interdiction force, educate the pilot, you can't fly here. Then they go and tell their friends, hey, cops stopped me from flying near the spot where we all used to fly, right? It's actually much more of a viral and long-term, more impactful solution versus, say, if I'm a drone pilot, I'm flying, and if I fly near an area, especially if I fly a DJI drone or an Autel, et cetera, I lose connectivity and the drone comes back and lands. I don't have that feedback loop or education of, oh, wow, I did something wrong. They detected, mitigated my drone and it came back and landed. I just thought, I thought it was just an error. And I may come back and make the same mistake again. And there's a huge, I think, disparity of costs between the solutions that can detect and identify, and then things that can go detect, identify, mitigate even further. And to make the analogy for a vehicular analogy, RF is like a seatbelt with the SRS seat restraint system, or anti-lock braking. You can tap the brakes, it's great. I've used something like a jammer, which is the most effective mitigation, as like an airbag. It's going to keep you safe. It's going to take the drone down with it as well. It may go somewhere else. And there's huge escalation as to when your airbag goes off in your car, what happens? Your vehicle's totaled, right? It's a very different type of, that red button you push to do mitigation is in the United States is reserved by 3-letter agencies, handful of law enforcement municipalities who purchase the product, ask some things specifically about the legality, and then they choose to ask for forgiveness later. Look at in Miami, for example, they use counter drone equipment during a music festival. They're currently being sued federally. So there's a huge misnomer about the counter drone equipment, and they all operate on software-defined radios, for example. All RF-based solutions, with the exception of Airscope themselves, they're all software-defined radios, right? Number of different companies, and I could be disparaging, and I won't. 90% of the stuff in the counter drone world does not work. And I say this because if you sell products to, and I have friends and colleagues and family members who served in the military, some of them did not come back. The products that you sell to those people, you have an obligation to ensure that you keep them safe. So there are certain companies that I think make remarkably robust solutions. So people don't even know about them, but Veris Solutions, they're a small team out of Virginia. They make some of the best detect and identify equipment out there. White Fox, a little bit larger, people know about them. Phenomenal detect and identify. Citadel, out of San Diego, some of the most proven products out there, right? Simple, effective. Then you have these other types of solutions that tend to either overpromise, underdeliver, and have very legitimate edge cases. And this is not to be disparaging because I do speak, I have the utmost respect for some of these folks who work at these companies, but kinetic kill is truly the sloppiest and least effective form of counter drone mitigation. It's like your last ditch effort, and it doesn't work against drone swarms, which is actually one of the biggest problems. And so I don't know, you need what, 50 drone hunters by Fordham to stop a swarm of 50 drones, and that product costs what, $100,000, I think, or maybe $80,000. It doesn't make economic sense. They have one posted up at the Utah State Capitol. I fly drones at the Utah State Capitol every single week. Never gets detected. I have police come and tell me, oh man, we have an anti-drone system. It should have detected this, the Capitol Police. It's frustrating because here as a taxpayer, right, my dollars are going towards solutions that don't really keep my brothers and sisters in arms that are safe. And that's the additional challenge of counter drone. So I also think that it's even more nascent.
We frequently, I'm going to make one right now. I'll just chuck a radio and some wires in a box, and I'll find my trusty guide switch here somewhere, and I'll sell you a counter drone system. It's really,
you could get a bomb detector, make a bomb detector like that guy did, and sold heaps to the UN or somebody, and it was just a hoax. Remember that?
Yeah, I do. Bobby's not old enough.
It was a Brit, wasn't it?
It was.
People don't know that.
Ian. Yeah.
The jammers that most people are using, there are repurposed IED jammers. It's the same technology. The challenge comes down to physics. I'm not an engineer, but many of them can tell you the ability to detect signals on the ground versus in the air, entirely different. Antenna design, other types of things, huge. And exactly, a swarm using LTE, even more difficult, right? RF doesn't really. I know people who are working on RF and how to detect airborne LTE versus ground-based LTE. And there's ways to do that. And in my opinion, actually, the telecom companies are the ones who ultimately will be the ones to control counter-drone. So think of it, if you are flying via LTE and you're identified as a bad actor, your telemetry gets cut off immediately, right? The tower, T-Mobile, Verizon, whoever else you're working with is able to verify using remote ID. And this is why I think it's interesting the telecom companies like Verizon purchasing drone service providers like Skyward.
With remote ID, why are we going to bother fitting that with our deadly drone?
The other thing too is, look, we're talking about how many people have died from these remote drone swarm attacks and drones attacking air. We're talking about a problem that does not yet exist. We are really rushing out all this money and technology and all this investment and fear mongering for something that just does not exist. It hasn't happened yet. It may happen in the future, but then again, we've seen you're more likely to die from a piece of falling space rock than from a drone attack. When do we say the risk is now, the risk level does not merit this level of investment, of all inconvenience? At some stage, you've got to do a risk analysis. Who has done the risk analysis and said, this is the risk of swarming drone attacks on civilian targets by terrorists, whatever? Where is that risk assessment?
So there is a gentleman, Zachary Kalenborn, a very, very brilliant analyst, doesn't specialize in drones, but generally like WMDs, terrorist attacks, etc. And I've spoken with him at length. He's kind of been one of the authors on drone swarms. And not to push back against you, Bruce, but overseas, particularly in Iraq, and in the Middle East in particular, U.S. forces and also our allies in particular have suffered casualties as a result of this. It's by no means, it's not 9/11 scale by any means. It's not at all to the scale of ground-based IEDs that have cost hundreds, if not thousands, of lives. It exists. I think there's this concern of how, and this, to be fair, I mean, that ZOHD dart behind Nicola, right? Somebody who is a bad actor could pre-plan put a cube on there, program a one-way mission, attach some explosive to an I2C port, and do some horrible damage, right? It's able.
Let's jump in there though, because this is the argument always, and this is where the argument falls down. It's always, if I attach a grenade to a drone, if I attach some C4 to a drone, etc., the root cause problem there then isn't the drone, it's the fact that you've got hold of the explosives. And if you're a terrorist that's got hold of those explosives, you're killing somebody whatever way, even if you're driving a car and you lob it out or whatever else you do. There was a case in the UK, and I think I mentioned it before, and I think it was heard at Sheffield court, but there was a terrorist, because it's about 10 years ago where it was first muted. I think it might have been New York Times, so it was definitely an American publication that said, a drone could potentially be used for a terrorist attack. So it's not like terrorists have been naive to this. They've looked at it, and this terrorist, he thought, oh, well, I've read it papers all the time. It's saying that a drone would be really easy to use for a terrorist attack. So he started plotting this and then realized that a drone couldn't carry any explosive cargo it could legitimately get in the UK. So what he was going to use was gunpowder from fireworks. And the only way he could deliver that with enough fireworks was to put it in a car. So then his plan changed to putting it in a car.
So that's the point. I mean, we're just this whole thing about this capability has been in place for 20 years. 20 years ago, I built my own proof of concept cruise missile. It's a drone, and it was powered with a jet engine, and I built it for under $5,000 using bits you could buy online and from the local hardware store. Terrorists have had this capability for 2 decades. You got to ask, why haven't they used it? If it's such an effective way to do it, why haven't they used it? Because terrorism, martyrdom is a big thing. It's much easier to convince some young youth to strap himself up with Semtex and walk into a crowded area and blow himself up, and then he gets the martyrdom, and the effect is dramatic. A Phantom 4 flying overhead and going bang and having bits of plastic fall on the ground, and a failed attempt, it's not quite the same thing. Why don't we ban or look at anti-pressure cooker systems? Because pressure cookers were used in the Boston bombing. They were a device that has no real, offensive purpose, but they repurposed them into an explosive device, and they killed people. Anything can be repurposed into something that it's not. And to pick on drones seems crazy. Terrorists, I don't think, I made the mistake 20 years ago thinking they would, because I thought terrorists were smart people, and they are smart, but they're smart different. They'll always take the easy route. The easy route is just get some young person get them all ideologically revved up and put a bomb on their back and send them into a subway station or something. That's the way terrorism works. I don't see. I mean, we've had manned aircraft like passenger jets. We've had Toyota pickup trucks. We've had U-Haul trucks. We've had SUVs. We've had knives. We've had guns. But we haven't had drones in the Western world on attacks against civilian targets. I think this is such a tiny, tiny risk that we've got much better things to be spending our time, money, and effort on to protect the general public. And I'm not in a war zone, perhaps, but in the civil environment.
Could I just, I mean, not to push back against you, Bruce, but I mean, it's like, I've been watching videos for years. No, there's the gentleman with UAV hype. I forgot your name. I actually never got your name. A pleasure to meet you.
It's Ian. Hi.
No, Ian, the reference though about like vehicles that I mentioned said, we have a reference point, which are roads, traffic signs, etc., things that we are familiar with, right? Those don't currently exist with drones. And there's as a result, like, again, Bruce, you've been flying RC for decades. Probably everybody here on this call has. When you show a drone to somebody who has never seen this type of technology, you go to buy a Mavic 2 from Costco or an Autel Evo from Best Buy, and you take it off and you have somebody fly it who has never seen it before. There is like you've all experienced it too. There's a wow factor. How is this possible? And just from the ability for the product to just hover in place and send the video commands. And the people I know, particularly law enforcement, who I sell a lot of these products to, they're amazed by the potential, and they also are concerned by how. And I especially during the protests that swept through the United States the last couple of years, people were flying drones over police operations, and there's certain things. Again, they may not be wanting to drop. There's an element, that three-dimensional space, that Americans in particular, I will say, we're not familiar with. We have many people in the United States who do not like drones flying over their property, and rightfully so. Most Americans are unaware that they do not own the airspace above their house, above a blade of grass. It is what it is. It's been that way for a very long amount of time. And there is this, I do think this is cultural. I think you folks in Europe, as well as Australia, are much more rational in how you approach UAS technology in most of your laws, to be fair. You also have a lot of thought leadership in that space, whether you have, the birth of PX4 and the birth of APM. You have, I mean, let's be fair. Like, if it wasn't for folks like Philip or Tridge and, Leonard and many others, and as well as all the folks, working on PX4, we wouldn't have a lot of the technology we have today. One of the things to push back though against Bruce is that, and I see this, and a lot of this is public information. They are essentially modified cruise missiles, right? They're not like this. They aren't these sophisticated, and they are sophisticated. They use some of them use SATCOM links or VHF, UHF, but they are essentially one-way. Yeah, they're guided cruise missiles, and they're not particularly autonomous. They're the threat that it presents. Like they're having. This is the other thing I wanted to mention, and this is why I think 9/11, again, so recent, brings this up. 9/11 was something that many people had talked about potentially happening. No one would have ever imagined. And when it happened, it was like, it left such a huge impact on our society and the laws. My concern, and I've spoken about this with many people in counter drone, I'm worried that as we make this technology, UAS, more accessible, more capable, more affordable, so like flying longer, better C2 links, etc., you can't change human behavior. There's just shitty people everywhere. Excuse my language. If one of these people gets access to something, again, I not to use like the gun control narrative, because I don't really agree with that narrative, but giving access to some of this technology is going to happen. You go to Best Buy right now and you can fly a drone that has the same capabilities of what we used to invade Iraq.
Just to jump in just slightly there though with where you're going. We've got to a point where drones have changed because of the 250 gram or 249, whichever way you want to call it, limit, where they're also small and compact and light, and that's not going to reverse. So the kind of window of doing something nasty with the drone is kind of passed, because it was bigger airframes that are the only practical to do it. You're not carrying on your Mavic Mini a payload that's going to do any damage. So I think, that window for that kind of bad acting has gone. And there might be a bit of, the privacy one. That's obviously one you can say you got an issue. Although having said that, you kind of haven't, because you've got to be so close to something to see it clearly, and you'll see the drone anyway. But that aside, if there was really going to be a threat, it would have been when everyone was self-building. It was big bodies, hobbyists were building stuff with a Vulcan body, which could carry a massive payload. And none of this stuff happened while it was. And even then, as I still say, you've got the issue of, if you can get hold of the payload, that's the root cause problem anyway. But I do think a lot of that problem has gone now because drones are also compact and light, and there is no market for heavier drones. So there's no, there isn't, for companies, there isn't any reason why you'd be going back and reversing all that and building something bigger, because you're going to be hit by regulation and people aren't going to be able to fly it.
I will. Just to add to
okay, I just wanted to let you know one thing, because there is a perception that maybe in America you're irrational and in Europe we're not, but we're not. That's not the case. We've got a thing in Europe called NIMBYs. So the difference here, right? They will complain and they will whack. So here they won't shoot it out of the sky, but they will, if they've got it, find an air pistol, or they'll go for a rock. Or they'll basically just be moaning on Facebook. But yeah, we have got the same attitude. You'll see it enacted in a slightly different manner.
But in respect to cultural things, America is, I know a lot of Americans and they're all really nice people, but as a nation, it's crazy. How many people have died as a result of terrorists using firearms in the USA? Yet everyone's allowed their firearm because it's in the Constitution. Yet little plastic drones, we fear them so much. They've never killed anybody, but we fear them so much we must do all this counter-UAS crap. You people just are not pragmatic. I don't think you're pragmatic. You need to look at where is the real danger? 30,000 people die on the roads, 30,000 people die from firearms every year, and bad actors have regularly used automatic firearms, semi-automatic firearms to kill large numbers of people in terror attacks. Nobody's ever used a drone on the continental USA, so surely the focus should be on the real problems.
I'm knocking on wood right now, so hopefully it doesn't happen. But something that I did want to add, so most of the people that work, and this is, again, to Ian, I have flown like these tiny whoops. I was flying a tiny whoop for some people who were in special forces. They were blown away. And they told me, like, they held it, and they had me, they wanted to test the thrust. And they told me that a tiny whoop can be used to deliver, like, a sizable amount of explosive to kill somebody in a room.
Slaughterbot.
So hold on. So something to clarify, and so the people who work in counter UAS, many of them are come from the defense side, and they have seen the potential, and also they work with the U.S. government, for the U.S. government. They understand kind of they're innovative people. So how they perceive a threat is like, oh man, I can turn that into something that can kill a bunch of people, and in turn that could also be used. So I'll use an example. The team at Anduril are some of the brightest people on the planet. They're very well funded, but if you read about like their pedigree, these people are like, they went to MIT, they were Army Rangers. These are not a bunch of your stereotypical like et cetera grunt type folks. They're some of the most elite people in America's fighting forces who are now employed by a tech company to make solutions for the warfighter. So you have this like.
Just jump in 1 second though. Yeah. Again, you're talking about they are putting military grade explosives on it. So you will be talking about, if that was ever employed on a drone, that isn't going to be a terrorist. That's going to be a state actor. So it's not going to be a lone terrorist using what he can get hold of. It's either directly a state actor like Russia, or it's someone like Iran that's directly sponsored the terrorists and bought them the equipment.
Yeah, and I understand there's a weird line of like, I don't talk about that stuff largely because, the optics of working in counter drone, now working for a US company, the family my parents are from. There's like certain things I try to obfuscate and not really like go down to, right? I will say that there has been very recently, and this has been public information, south of the border, Mexican drug cartels using modified DJI airframes for explosives. Now, the challenge, and I can say this, like U.S. Customs Border Patrol has had a very difficult time the last 10, 20 years trying to stop a number of things coming to our country, whether it's guns, drugs, human trafficking, et cetera. They are some of the biggest proponents of counter-drone technology. And there's a gentleman on the thread who said it makes sense for prisons, it makes sense for airports. I think it makes sense for military bases, et cetera. But this idea that this is technology that needs to be, again, if you look at the White Fox Scorpion, which I was the product manager of, people would show it. I had friends asking me, hey, can I buy it? So folks, some of them are multimillionaires. No, you can't buy a piece of military grade equipment, nor should you as a citizen. And I think that maybe this is something that we can all agree on, is that how can we put counter drone in a box that is best served to protect the people it's meant to protect? Because this idea,
that's a really good point, especially with the ones with the RF mitigation techniques, because as we all know, you can stop a radio signal exactly at the thing that you want to stop flying, be you jamming the GPS, jamming 5.8, 2.4 or whatever. That signal's not going to keep flying past past several miles. That'll be perfectly fine.
Sorry, Gary, when you're talking. I was just going to say one of the concerns that I do have, and is with the counter drone, is the ones that are being sold, because I've got telecoms companies here selling the counter drone systems, and these are just being given out to basically security guards. It's that kind of level, and here you are with counter drone, and then you are going to get somebody sooner or later that either accidentally or just because they're out of complete boredom shoots a completely legal drone out of the sky.
Yeah, no, it definitely should be only toys to be played with by the grown-ups, isn't it? That's the bottom line.
But stick. If you give a stick to a military, he'll make a weapon out of it. So it's the same with drones.
The same with any 5-year-old boy. So any 5-year-old boy will do the same.
Come on. We've all seen the car bombs and the teleguided cars that you just ram against something filled with explosives, and that does not mean that there are special rules for cars. So it's and there is no special way to stop cars except for those concrete barriers, but those are there for other reasons too. So why are drones different? That's the entire issue.
Well, Louis, sorry, I know you joined a little bit later, but I think they're different because they operate in 3-dimensional space, and that additional degree of freedom concerns people, because we don't have, to quote Tim Bean of Fordham, we don't have checkpoints or highways in the sky just yet to navigate where things are supposed to go. And to Gary, and I should mention, you guys have been incredibly patient and tasteful in. I know Patrick's a little bit more vocal about this, but drone industry is still very, very new. It's very nascent. The business aside, but the tech for me to receive a hot cup of coffee being delivered by drone on my front doorstep is like many, many years away. Many years away.
No, it's not. I've seen all the drawings. I've seen all the venture capital money. Yeah, no, I've seen. No, it's not. It's here now. It's here now.
This 3-dimensional thing. The 3-dimensional thing isn't new. We've had aircraft for many, many years, and we have less regulation on ultralights. Now, an ultralight can carry a pilot, perhaps a jihadi, someone with suicide bomber with a backpack covered in massive explosives. He can fly under the radar into a populated area and do far more damage than a drone. But he doesn't have to register. He doesn't have to have a remote ID. He doesn't have to have any of the provisions that the government's laying down for drones. Why the difference?
I think the accessibility.
You're watching the last ever Drone and Sundry show with all the conversation that's going on here.
And I'll tell you what, while we're on the subject of giving people ideas, if I wanted to do something, if I was a bad actor, I would use a hydrogen balloon with something hanging underneath it and a pre-programmed drop, and it has a very low radar profile. It can carry a reasonable payload, and it operates in 3 dimensions. And it's
don't give them the idea.
Simpler.
Well, that's already been done. That was the first.
And the Japanese did that, and
Japanese, and also and the Vatican
Bruce,
as well.
It's the accessibility, I believe. It's the accessibility of the tech.
You can buy a plastic rubbish bag, some aluminium foil, and some sodium hydroxide, and make your own hydrogen balloon in 10 minutes.
Need hydrogen.
Agreed.
The Gaza Strip. Look at the Gaza Strip. It's hot air balloons, and they throw it. And when the wind blows to Israel, they just launch it.
Agreed. But
why do you have to make it so complicated? It's just
unfortunately
so easy.
Well, so like, all of us, I think, have some experience with RC. So like helicopters, if you recall, they were not easy to fly. They were extremely expensive. And, when they crashed, they crashed. The drone is so easy to fly and so easy to use. Like, I don't have to learn how to set up. For example, you buy an Autel, you buy a DJI, you buy most of these commercial off-the-shelf products. I don't have to learn how to set up Arduino Pilot, PX4, any parameters. I just do it. And the time it takes, and this is objective, right? I can go to Best Buy right now and for under $1,000 buy something that flies for 5 miles away, gives me HD video. I can do, and again, if I had bad intent, I could do something with it. I'm not calling for the regulation of drones. I think that there needs to be this understanding of that they are extremely capable. I think that the government, my opinion, and having spoken to the FAA, is that they're so capable, they're worried because we have a history. I guess America has the safest national airspace in the world. We'd like to keep it that way. So they're very cautious about how drones can be integrated. I currently live in Salt Lake City, Utah. There's lots of open space. We have RC fields, FRIAs, etc. Have I flown a drone in a park before? Absolutely. You can check out my YouTube channel. Multiple times. FPV, I have flown above 400 feet. All of this before I had my 107, before I even worked in this industry, right?
Oh dear. 400 feet. It was less than 400 feet. It was an error on the readings.
Exactly. And how would I know if I didn't have a barometer on my, on the flight control? Again, there's all these types of things. They are edge cases. I understand, and in my opinion, there's just a misunderstanding. Ultimately, this comes down to a misunderstanding of the technology. You folks here understand the technology better than 90% of the people in the entire industry, Philip included in this, right? In my opinion, it's you folks who I think need to it's not your burden. It's unfortunately this requirement where you have to educate the lawmakers, because you currently have companies, whether it's counter drone or UAS, lobbying lawmakers, spreading misinformation about the threat of a certain thing. So one of which is Chinese made drones, for example, right? You know what else is Chinese made? The computer I'm talking to you on and this iPhone, right? The products from the most profitable company in the history of the world, all of them manufactured almost exclusively in China, right? And there are these certain perceptions that people have admit, and I say this because I think Skydio makes the single best follow me drone out there, right? A lot of this anti-China rhetoric, I don't think legislators understand. You're going to force a Chinese company to take their technology and reincorporate here in the United States. You're inviting an alligator into your duck pond. And when that happens, those Chinese companies are going to come and chop and eat up all of your profits because they're going to take your customers from you, right? Versus this notion of educating and expressing and doing a little bit of a deep dive and technically talking about the product, right? If there's no way for the drone to connect to a cloud and the data is stored locally on an airframe or on the controller, of course it's secure. DJI did the exact same thing. And what happened? Another law came out that targeted DJI by name to try and push their product. And unfortunately, if it wasn't for DJI, 90% of the industry wouldn't even be here. And I know Philip may disagree, but I'll go to the grave believing that. You won't have any of the billions of dollars worth of software as a service tools that have been developed to help the industry. Drone Deploy, Drone Base, Pix4D, this, that, and the other. You wouldn't have any of these. You wouldn't even have a Skydio. There wouldn't be an Autel. And I think that there's this huge pushback and a misunderstanding that American drone companies just need more funding. American drone companies need 10 years of catching up to do on software-defined radios, 10 years of catching up on flight control technology. I mean, this is not, it is not a misnomer, right? Like, there's a reason why these products have sold so well and are being used by law enforcement. Yet you have to educate the customer, in this case, the regulators, on why this makes sense. And because you lot here truly know, Gary in particular, man, you know so much about the industry and the technology. And the people who watch these videos, some of them are actually, lawmakers and policymakers. They see that, oh, wow, our assumptions and presumptions about this technology is completely false. What is the alternative? Everyone's looking for a solution. And I think you folks actually know how to provide them with that. And if there's a way to nudge, like, for example, Philip has a disagreement, and I told him, my friend, you should talk with counter UAS companies and educate them as to why they don't need to be approaching this whole, I'll use Department 13 as an example because they're in Australia and I know that there's some relations there. Just express and like articulate, not collaborate, but talk about why the threat doesn't work for whatever reason. There doesn't need to be some sort of like deep, I've said there should be deep collaboration. There should just be remote conversation between OEMs and counter drone companies to explain how their products work, how the threat works. For example, have you ever used Mission Planner? Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, no, because I think when you say Philip, you're talking about Philip Rouse.
Yeah, I think he's one of the most influential people in the industry who we have to thank, not just from the open source side, but from the commercial enterprise side.
Yeah, I know what his concern is with counter drone. His concern is when he gets approached by counter drone companies that say, we want your keys.
A backdoor. Yeah, exactly. I asked him for that. Totally.
Yeah,
he said no.
The reason why he doesn't want to do this is because he gets asked for that, and then that technology gets sold to governments for millions of pounds, with them saying, "Oh, we've had to come up with some fancy solution with all these engineers," when they haven't. They've just gone and bought backdoors from the manufacturers, which isn't doing that level of work. So basically, they're wanting a cash cow out of it. And Phillips, no, he's like, I will just give this information to government so they can defend themselves without being price gouged. That's what it's about with Philip.
And I actually I admire Philip's integrity. My only contention is that those end users in the government already write contracts to the private industry. Like it's unfortunate, and you see this here in the United States, where the counter drone industry is, I think, a little more flooded than it should be. You have companies that are trying to do the same thing. I actually asked Philip for a very similar type of conversation, not regarding the cube, but just like counter drone in general. And again, there's other counter drone companies have asked this about Autel. Why would I give you information about my control link that gives us a tactical advantage and a huge advantage over the competition? And ultimately, the reality is that counter drone companies have no interest in making control link. They just want to be able to detect and mitigate. So just having a conversation is important. Don't give the keys to the kingdom. I mean, it was very important for Philip to express that to me. And because now I know, A, I'm never going to ask him again. And B, if I asked, other people have asked too, which shows that we in the counter drone community have the wrong approach to trying to work with OEMs and collaborators. I feel like I've been talking for too much, so my apologies. There's a lot of, particularly this industry is so new. Like we don't even have, like Mavlink is the closest thing we have to a USB standard. It's very nascent. And a couple of years down the line, I think both the counter drone industry will mature and its needs. It'll be integrated as part of UTM, as part of like the supplemental data service providers, which you're seeing right now. And then maybe in a couple of years, I can get that coffee. I don't know. I know, I mean, I think Gary, you said this, the same with Bruce, like it makes sense for medicine and emergency use cases, whether it's, behind enemy lines, et cetera. But the business case for me getting a bag of chips that normally I buy why wouldn't an autonomous car where there's way more developers and way more money, why, Amazon delivers my neighborhood year round. Next year, they're gonna have electric trucks.
What's that big company in China, big delivery company? I can't remember. It doesn't matter.
Alibaba,
whatever they're called.
JD. Yeah.
XYZ.com, whatever they are. They just put 1,000 six-wheeled robots on the streets of a particular city. 1,000 wheeled delivery robots. I mean, that is the way it's going to go. And that's the sort of thing.
I've always been a pessimist about the drone delivery, but I'm slightly changing my view on this. When you look at Manor Aero in Ireland, where they are literally delivering food to people, and they're happy to be having deliveries by drone, because there are obviously you've got to work out the end model, because do you really want to be giving drones to companies? Probably not. You probably want to have a single. You basically want an industrial estate where the drone takes off from there, and all the restaurants are around it, and their kitchens can put it straight onto the drone, which I think is the kind of approach at the minute. But when you think about the practicality, I mean, if you look like Deliveroo and Just Eat, and how these businesses have come out of nowhere and they have exploded. And it's
exploited. Did you say exploited their draw riders? Exploited.
But it's the customer experience of the fact that they can order a meal, and from that meal being cooked, when it finishes cooking, to being at their doorstep is like 3 or 4 minutes. So you're getting it piping hot. I mean, when you look at delivery drivers from like Uber Eats and whatever, and they've done like surveys, and like 70% of drivers said they've actually pinched food out of the deliveries they do. So you're getting it. The drone's not going to pinch your food. So you're going to get your food directly from the chef having last touched it to your doorstep in 3 minutes, piping hot. And they're saying that that's working out economically cheaper for the companies than having delivery drivers and doing it in a car. So, there is an argument. We'll have to see how that scales up and if that turns out true. But the idea there was it was simple engineering. They weren't over engineering it. It's you have an app, you basically point it to somewhere in your garden at a reasonable space. And the drone, they didn't even think about landing the drone because that's complicated and you're giving yourself lots of trouble. All the complication of the drone is just about it using what sensors it has and the software on just winching that down to the ground and then getting the winch back up afterwards. And the fact they put the battery in as part of the thing that holds the food. And I presume that's that heat helps heat the food. And B, they just take the cartridge out, put a new cartridge in. So every time you're doing a delivery, so that they've dealt with that thought of how do you keep the batteries cycling? It's the cartridge that holds the food. So I think from what I've seen of them, I thought of all the people that are doing it, just by keeping it simple, I could actually see that working. But
it's a limited use case. Again, look at the area they're operating in. And the other thing is, these companies say, "Oh, we're like." Google Wing claims we're operating a successful commercial drone delivery service, but they're not charging anybody. That's not a commercial business. And it's the same with the one you're talking about. They're claiming a lot of stuff, but I haven't seen any independent verification of this. Now, if you're starting up a new enterprise, of course, you're going to claim it's working really well and everything's fantastic and it's just as you planned. You're not going to say, "Oh, we're having real problems," because you're not going to get any more financing and you're not going to be able to continue.
Well done with that. What struck me was the CEO is on Twitter. Now, in the past, when there's been CEOs with businesses that have been oversold. I remember like Plexidrone as being an example. The CEO was on social media. So I started hitting him up with questions because the first thing he's saying is, this is all our invention. This is all our IP. So I said, so you've written your own flight software already? And he's going, yeah, of course we have. And I'm thinking, 10 years? It'll probably take you to do that. How have you done that? So I said, so how many QA staff have you got then? And he couldn't answer that. So basic questions. I thought, no, mate, you're having a laugh. Whereas this guy, Bobby, that's for Manor Aero, I started hitting all the questions. So I said, well, how come you're not flying it in the rain? And every answer, he came back with a proper answer. He says it flies in the rain. It's been caught in the rain. But he says, we're not doing it all our flights in the rain at the moment because we haven't gone for the proper test certification. So he's saying, we'd have to put this through tens of thousands of hours being tested. Basically what he was saying is we're going through the proper test procedures we would as any other proper airspace technology would, and treating it to that standard. So that it comes across as having an engineering mindset and good answers. And if you doubt that, what I say is just get on Twitter and give him a grilling and see what make your own mind up from that.
That doesn't change the laws of physics and the laws of economics, though. I mean, as you say, flying in the rain's one thing, flying in the wind's another thing. There's this, so you can anyone can get a drone to deliver something to somebody and say that's successful. But when you bring in all the economic factors and all the other factors which make it, whether it's a viable business, that's totally different. He may be doing it perfectly successfully, but can he make money out of it in the longer term with all the other aspects and elements involved? I still haven't seen a business case that actually, or a business plan that actually enables that to operate as a sustainable business model.
Well, let's look. We've had Bobby here for an hour, and we haven't abused him yet about Autel and Autel stuff and Autel machines.
Yeah, let's go for it. Yes.
And Ian Mad will have lots of questions to this, I'm sure, if he's even listening.
Ian loves the 8K camera, don't you, Ian?
Oh God, don't get me started with Autel again.
Well, Louis wants an SDK. I think that's what you want, isn't it, Louis?
You'll be getting it. You're getting it.
Louis wants an SDK. What do you want, Ian?
I want to understand really where the push is now. So, from obviously, Bobby, from a US point of view, things are pretty clear. You've acquired some good people, to say the least. You've got John on the team. You've got Ken, who I have the privilege of knowing particularly well, who's been doing some stuff on the enterprise side with you guys as well. From a Europe point of view, what's the plan? Because everything looks very US at the moment, but Europe seems to hang in the balance a little bit.
Can I interrupt you? I don't think so, because they have improved their distribution network in Europe. I see that. You're only UK, so you're outside of Brexit, so
UK is all that matters, Louis, to be fair.
So we're the
I've seen their distribution channel in Europe getting improved.
Yes, so something to clarify, and I get a lot of inquiries on LinkedIn about opportunities in Europe in particular. So Autel Robotics USA, our region is the Western Hemisphere, which we are in the discussion of maybe reassessing because, quite frankly, we all speak English. So maybe it would behoove us to maybe do a little more work with the folks across this, across both sides of the pond that speak English. We're in the process of realigning, I think, our strategy. SDK is coming. It's something that I get asked about all the time. And we are relaunching an SDK strategy where we'll have a unified SDK. Products will launch with SDK. We have a product coming out pretty darn soon that SDK won't be available immediately, but it'll be available pretty soon afterwards. So I have I've had a lot of questions about Autel. So I joined middle of June. I've known Randall several years. I've known John for just as long. We're actually all based here in Utah. And I've actually wanted to work with the two of them probably since the beginning. So it was an opportunity that I just could not turn down. The direction that was put into motion this summer is still in the process of being executed. So someone asked this question is Autel a US-based company? Our manufacturing currently is not, but it will be. We're in the process of actually building our drones in the United States for the US customer.
Scooperama. So does that? Right, because people are, look what happened to Philip with the Hearlink. So is that with the Huawei phone in it, or without the Huawei phone in it?
Everything's NDA compliant, and so obviously we will start with serving the U.S. federal customer. So actually, the reason I was hired was to help lay out a Blue SUAS strategy for the company. And this is something where I
don't worry,
want to explain.
Don't worry.
No, it's fine. If you look at the Blue SUAS requirements, they're very explicit about what the product is supposed to do. Now, if you want a US-made drone, it's going to cost more than a drone that's made overseas. That's just reality. And to be fair, our consumer-grade products will continue to be manufactured overseas. There are certain flavors for certain customers who obviously want to have a product NDA compliant. That is something that is like the number one priority for the company, is to actually create full Blue SUAS compliant airframes by the end of the year. And we're in the process.
Do you think? Sorry, I'm batting in on you.
Go ahead,
but
please.
Why do you think that three-letter company seems so against doing that? It's been obvious that they should have done that for years.
I'll be very transparent. Why? They're targeted. No matter what they do, they'll never be able to pass muster. You can actually see this tonight. Brenden Schulman, I haven't spoken to him about this, but I've heard from other people that he's become exhausted explaining this. DJI has done every single thing the US government had asked them to do for a large portion of time, where audit their software, create special versions of firmware, special types of hardware with encrypted links, and that were audited independently. There's now this shift of DJI products being used for human rights abuses in a certain province, etc. I can't comment on that, one, because I don't know about that, but also more importantly, and just to be completely objective, as a patriot and as an American taxpayer, there's a lot of products that we make and sell that have been used for not the most savory purposes either, right? Maybe many publicly traded companies, Axon, for example, right, who owns a number of different solutions that have been used by law enforcement that have come under scrutiny. It's not a particularly legitimate claim, in my opinion, that you're able to judge and again, this is the other thing I should mention without divulging too much, and I'd like to clarify this. There's a huge amount of, and this is again, Randall's one of my closest friends. I talk with him on a regular basis. His farewell post from Autel made had confused some people. And I saw some people in the UAS industry, particularly in the United States, parroting and reasserting some of their own presumptions that are incorrect. DJI and Autel are not related at all. In fact, if you're familiar with the history of the companies, they actually have competed quite actively overseas. They've been in a number of lawsuits with one another for a number of different things. They're not related at all, period. And so this idea that it's a sister company of DJI, completely false.
So no frank relationships.
Here's the thing. So this is, I want to clarify, and this is the most I'm going to say about this. So the US translation of the owners of each companies, their first name, they chose Frank. That's the only relation. They both happen to be named Frank in English. That is it.
Cheers, Nicola. Take care.
See you, Nicola. Yeah, it's funny. I've had some dealings with DJI in the background, and I think at one point there was like 6 Franks. Frank is a surprisingly popular take as well in China on a British name of things. As you say, it was never thing. What's been interesting is, if we watch this whole thing unfold, okay, you guys have taken a bit of noise over the link thing. I think that got quite blown up out of proportion in the sense of, okay, community need to look at DJI have changed links every other model, if not every model. Yet when Autel make a change, suddenly it's an issue. Yes, I can understand there's been some confusion and okay, people bought a product hoping that it would be supported, and you guys did as much as you could do on that. Do you know? And at the end of the day, they made an offer. You know, if you've got the V1, we'll give you the V1. You know, we'll sell you the V1. If not, you can have the V2. I think what's interesting is there's a hole which we've all talked about in the market that no one seems to want to fill, which is this Phantom 4-sized hole. Now, because look, the Mavic is DJI created. It's fair to say DJI created that folding style of drone where we've had with the original Mavic Pro, and Autel have taken that their flavor, and you know, the Phantom 4 Pro, though, it seems to be a product that everyone wants from a commercial point of view because it fits a very good market. It has the global shutter, it has the camera that people want, yet no one seems to be filling this. You know, I'm shocked Autel don't have anything in this space, because you had the X-Star in the past. You know?
Yeah, I don't want to divulge too much, but so the Phantom 4, and this is my own opinion, I don't know a lot about DJI. I kind of focus on my own thing. I don't think the Phantom line is coming back, and I think that because of the advances in drone technology, you have the size of the airframe that Gary has in his hands, and then you have the Mavic, and that covers so many bases. And so, like, okay, Mavic 3 is going to have a incredibly impressive payload that you don't need the Phantom 4 Pro anymore. And there's our strategy, and this is something that people don't understand. People think that we compete with DJI. Nobody competes with DJI. Just let's make that very clear. And anybody, with respect to Parrot and Skydio, like, they're delusional if that's the case. The orders of magnitude that the company sells, the amount of employees. I mean, I can tell you this, we at Autel, we have more engineers than Skydio has employees total, right? And we are tiny compared to DJI.
You sure? Because they've been employing like brilliant.
Like crazy. No, I've got very good tabs on all of the competition. I know people that work at the company. I speak with the recruiters regularly. I had interviewed in the past for some of these companies. So the people ask about a 1-inch sensor and a global shutter. And I believe the market eventually is going to, like, that's going to happen eventually, no matter what. One of the things that to talk about, and there's the reason that there's pushback on the 1-inch sensor, it's actually not the OEMs. You have some phenomenally talented software development teams on the software as a service side who are able to process the data to be comparable. So, and this is, I mean, some people may not like that. Some people will disagree, and that's fine. But again, I'm not a software engineer, but when I ask the people like at Drone Deploy or Pix4D, these people that make phenomenal imagery, they already have software that's able to account for this. So like, this is something that it eventually is going to come. The question is like, how soon do you need it? And do you really, really, really need it? And again, there's this education, like me, I don't have the experience doing mapping as, like, say, some of the folks at Frontier Precision, who also asked, hey man, when are we gonna get this 1-inch sensor? And I can't justify as to like if the imagery is actually better. I can just tell you that there's already software in there that, from a business perspective, right? From if you are a end user and you have a Phantom 4 or you have a Mavic 2 Pro that doesn't have the global shutter, you still want to get quality data and imagery out of. There's the value add is actually for the software companies to help make that happen. If you look at it from a business perspective, they have a strong incentive to make it work. because we as an OEM, it costs us actual money, R&D, and non-recoverable engineering to innovate, right? Software, and this is not to be disparaging of software companies, software doesn't, you crash, crashing is easy. Bugs are, I wouldn't say software is easy, it is easier. It requires less overhead, et cetera. And so regarding the P4 Pro, I don't believe that Autel will ever make, we aren't going to make, my understanding, a Phantom-sized airframe. What you will likely see is a equally comparable payload to the Phantom 4 on a Evo-sized airframe.
And I think that it's that Apple approach, isn't it, with the iPhone, that, everyone's saying we want bigger cameras, yet we've just had the new iPhone today, which again is taking things a step further and further. If the rumors are to be believed with the Mavic 3, because there's a load of, I'm not convinced, but we will have to see. It makes sense, but we're talking again, as you say, we're going to be packing that technology into the smaller airframe.
I can tell you, so the challenge, yes, you're going to see it. You will see better image quality from a smaller airframe. The challenge with the payload, so the camera, how do you process that imagery? So there's a number of companies, I've seen them post like, oh my goodness, we have a 10K sensor with X amount of terabytes throughput. Cool. Who do you know that has a 10K display? Who do you know that's actually able of processing, has hardware capable of actually processing X amount of terabytes per second that even needs that type of stuff for our type of information? Nobody. And it's the same reason, this is why it's unique. Like I have, prior to working at Autel, I've flown the 6K. I'm talking to you on a relatively new Mac. It's like it's the M1 Mac, right? It has challenges sometimes processing the data that's coming from the drones, okay? And it's the same thing with like this idea of the imagery of the payloads. Like it's very, very specialized. So if you look at, it makes sense for us to sell a higher quality payload that goes onto Evo 2, whatever predecessor in that form factor, then create a larger airframe, right? Because there's compromises with that. And as you mentioned, one of the gentlemen, I think it might have been Ian, who said about like the heavier, larger drones. I believe the M300 is one of the most like successful products that DJI has released since the Mavic. And if you, and particularly for law enforcement and surveying, because of the ability for those payloads to integrate and to get the data from those payloads, whether it's LiDAR, the high end like Regal, a bunch of stuff.
Jumping on that one though, in the UK, please. The Mavic 2 Enterprise is probably more popular with the police forces because of money as much as anything. The real thing with the like your M300s of that is the IP rating, and even then, the reason that's popular is because it's misunderstood as being it's completely waterproof. I think, in fact, that's one of the areas really where someone really does need to make a step forward is a product that's there for consumers, that's waterproof. If someone could do your Mavic and it be proper IP rated, you can fly it in the rain. The police forces would just be buying them, like hotcakes.
Splash drone.
Splash drone, yeah. The only person I know with a fleet of M300s is Louis. Now, Louis, is the M300 a successful machine, or have you still got 200s? I can't remember. Did I get that wrong?
Well, accounting for the large number of vehicles that we have deployed all over the world, the number of issues we've been having were compared to the flight hours, the thousands of flight hours that in aggregate we have, it's just fulfilling what is designed to. My gripes are it's big, has a huge constraint on deploying units across the world. But that's nothing to do with the drone. The drone does what we want as a stable SDK, and we can do whatever we want from them. So it just works. So it falls on that category. It's not exciting. Is nothing of the kind. So give me something. Even at the same price points, that does something better than that one. That's the point.
The M300. So the ruggedization, to Ian's point, is a very important thing that I don't know if a lot of people have been able to solve. We're in the process of trying to solve that. Blue SUS requirements have a certain level of IP rating. There is, yeah, I mean, so go back to that's the 20 megapixel global shutter. It's something that we, ideally, if you really want it to happen, talk to your dealers in particular, because it is an eventual thing. It's eventually going to happen. The question is, what is the timing? How soon do you need it? People don't know that the Evo series has a, I mean, maybe you guys do because you're in the drone industry. You can swap payloads on the Evo. 2 screws, you buy a payload, you swap it. We are currently in the process of looking at how we can enhance the Evo 2 platform by offering more payloads that people can then swap and upgrade. We recently released the enterprise offerings, which have a paired smart controller, batteries, a number of other type of, I think, quite useful accessories, multi-charger, and then the phenomenal case that it comes with. And you really actually do save quite a bit of money as a result. The controller alone is like $1,000. The idea is that you can buy any Evo and then add different payloads to it to get the need that you want. And again, this all comes back to someone's point about the chips. So the chip shortage has created this fragmentation of ecosystem that we are navigating, which we also are going to set a standards that generally not going to happen again, because we're in the process of developing a completely unified product line with a unified SDK. So you were able to create offerings for this one SDK that is able to support XYZ product. The Dragonfish is actually in its own separate little lane, just as you're probably aware, it's a different vehicle, different flight dynamics, but all the multi-copters will be in a certain type of unified SDK. We do play, we are using the same control link for a number of those airframes for the non-made in USA variants. The Blue UAS products have very, very specific requirements, control link that you have to use in other types of things. So we're going with certain partners to do that. As for our main products, we will eventually be releasing a product that is a smart controller for all our devices. It uses a common control link. The thing that people have challenges about and frustration is that we actually didn't change our control link. We didn't change our control link as a marketing thing. It was out of necessity. The new one that we've selected, which you'll be learning about here in the next couple of weeks / months, is phenomenal. It's actually better range and better video quality, less latency as well. And we have a few software offerings that are going to, and 1 or 2 hardware offerings that are going to complement our airframes to create like a very, very comprehensive and connected ecosystem with SDK support to then support partners who are used to partners who work specifically with mixed fleets. So my opinion is that the future of drones, like, yes, nobody has the luxury of being like Apple in the drone space besides DJI. We just have to accept that. And moving forward, drones are like enterprise IT. How can you buy a commercial off-the-shelf solution, that also supports Arducopter and PX4? And that is what in my opinion, is like the future of the industry. How can we all grow together? Because there's integration challenges, and also due to the really, I think the specialized needs of the industry and the sensors associated with it, some folks are going to want a custom payload, and they're going to custom airframe, which is why I think the folks, whether it's Bobby Watts or the folks at FreeFly and the dozens of other folks, they're a needed part of the ecosystem. And the software that manages these fleets, and I think eventually a drone in a box system that will complement these, like the First Eye system that the guys at First Technologies have created, that's like a missing piece. All we can do is just, as at Autel, create the absolute best user experience possible for our customers who want to use our products not just for consumer purposes, but for enterprise purposes. So to answer Kevin's question, will this all be without the support of China? Our consumer products are still going to be made in China, right? And there's this idea of like, and this, people don't understand this, like there is a misperception of Chinese companies who want to make products and solutions for the US government, right? And not every single Chinese company is under the influence of the CCP, not every single company, again, there's a lot of misconceptions and assumptions. So we actually currently do have an SDK that many people have used. As you can see, Skybrowse, some of our other phenomenal partners have integrated with us. So ideally, to answer, Kevin's question, our consumer products will continue to be made overseas. Our SDKs will support those as well. We have a completely separate type of business that we're offering to the US customer. And this is the reality, right? There's not a single way that anybody can compete on price with China. That's just these are just basic labor economics. Absolute reality, okay? It's never going to happen. You make compromises on your product as a result. When you sell to the government, it's different. We are planning on making the absolute best airframe that the US government has ever seen for the best possible price. And it's because we're able to, yeah.
Can I just be absolutely selfish and
please go ahead.
Make a feature request for the consumer side?
Of course.
No one since the 3DR Solo has made a cable cam and orbit and all the other features it did as smooth. I think it was a guy called.
Oh God!
I'm trying to think of surname, but it used. I remember the way they looked at. They used physics from I think a guy called Kalman who ended up at Pixar. Really, a lot of thought had gone into it to making it look smooth and organic. Whereas a lot of the moves, even on your DJI stuff, even when you're using Lich in that, it still looks a little bit robotic. Because I've got mates in the commercial world doing videos, and they're still occasionally send me videos, and I push it through ProAdrenaline to smooth it out, send them it back, and it just. It's a little thing that hurt me that drone's been and gone, and yet the things that it did with the video, just the smoothness of it, it was fantastic. And I just wish somebody would implement that as standard.
Just write a Lua script and run it on Ardupilot, and Bob's your uncle.
Yeah, it's not that simple because you haven't got the gimbal because it was two things, wasn't it? It was the software in the gimbal. Along with that, the software that was telling it what to do, because the gimbal was even taking information from the flight controller on the requests and all kinds.
Requests to Bobby. Look at the size of the batteries so they can be aircraft carrying friendly.
Okay.
So that is the biggest problem. That DJI had the M210 V1. The batteries were aircraft friendly. The M600, the batteries were aircraft friendly, and when they launched the M210 V2, the batteries stopped being aircraft friendly. Well, let's not speak about $700 a pop for the M300 batteries and
800
aircraft friendly. It's good for DJI because you can ship a drone and the systems around the drone across the world, and then you have to go and beg to the local dealer to sell you 10 sets of batteries. So
can I ask you two difficult questions, Bobby? I'm going to put you on the spot for two difficult ones. Okay.
Of course.
Right. First of all, how is Autel going to avoid the mistakes DJI made? Because, I 100% agree with you. With the China thing, it's interesting because we don't have this so much in the UK. But, from the US market point of view, we're happy to have our cheap TVs, laptops and everything else. Yet when it comes to drones, we're jumping up and down about Chinese gear. The reality is every laptop, every phone is made by Foxconn, whether it be, every iPhone. You can't pick and choose when you're happy to have cheap consumer goods or high quality consumer. Let's be realistic. China makes some of the highest quality consumer goods that exist on the planet. It might have an Apple logo on the top of it, but it's manufactured in China. And that's not because China can't do it. It's because of a partnership that US and China that develops some amazing goods. But it's going to be hard for Autel to avoid the same problems that DJI have had once you start gaining traction, because at the moment you're somewhat under focus, if you know what I mean. You're off the radar like DJI has been, but as you come up, you're going to face the same problem.
We have some unique answers to that. And I made the analogy to inviting an alligator to a duck pond.
Yeah.
We have a lot more flexibility than DJI does, enormously. I mean, if you have done business with our company, you probably have the cell phone of our CEO, Gary DeLuca. You probably have met, our general manager and owner. Like, we have access in the sense that DJI does not have. So as a company, we get feedback. Now, in terms of working with the US government, I don't want to, maybe I should even mention that we're planning on doing this, because I was hoping to see the look on everybody's face at Fort Benning in a couple of weeks. But it's a different type of approach, because essentially I can say that what we plan on doing is something that I don't know if DJI was willing to do. And we're planning on making a lot of concessions, but to meet the needs of the US customer, because we believe that is worth it. And we ultimately want to serve the US warfighter as Americans, as an American company.
Yeah, one of the biggest mistakes DJI made, look, I've had a bit of involvement in the background with DJI in the past, and one of the biggest mistakes they had was they wouldn't let go. Very simply, they wouldn't let go of some stuff to allow them to get through the door where needed. And, if a company's willing to do that, then almost the benefits are there for the reaping. Now, the second thing I wanted to get you on is and this is sort of a bit selfish, but there's a massive push to right to repair movement beginning to take hold across the globe right now. Okay. Mm-hmm. And drones right now are about to become right in the middle of this, because frankly, there's some of the most unfriendly repairable products that exist on the planet. Apple are under a lot of focus and a lot of thing, but it won't be long before the drone industry gets picked up in this as well. And we're at Autel going to stand on this, because if I take DJI, I can buy nothing, right? I've got 4 or 5 aircraft here. I can't even buy an antenna for some of this stuff, let alone a replacement PCB. Are Autel going to be willing to open up the parts supply?
So there's some conditions to that. Like, yes, absolutely. But I mean, obviously I'm talking to some of the most skilled people in the drone industry, right? There's a lot of people who think they can fix a drone and they cannot. There are a lot of people that run drone companies who think they can build a drone and they cannot. So this notion of the opening of us at Autel having access to our product and hardware, there is a right to repair. Obviously, we have to rectify how that impacts warranty and other types of things.
Yeah.
Did you install it properly? Did you ground yourself before you picked up the PCB? Like little things that, to be fair with you.
But I'm just going to argue with you on that a little bit. We don't restrict people buying parts for their cars. That can kill 10 people down the road as well. So, there is this argument in the electronics industry that Apple are pushing, which is it would be dangerous to allow consumers to repair their own products. For me, this is about making reasonable parts available. At the end of the day, a manufacturer can't worry about what a consumer is going to do. I understand the warranty point of view and what you have to cover your warranty.
I really don't agree with you. What I want is a good service department that can turn around the drones sent to them within 24 hours. That's what we need.
But that's commercial, Louis. That's a different entity.
It's the same. It's the same. Come on. You, Ian, Gary might have the inclination to get the soldering iron, getting the keys, and tinkering 2 or 3 days to put the drone together. Nobody else does that.
No,
nobody else.
I mean, just
come on, guys. Get outside of the house and meet real people. Please, Louis. Guys, there are real people outside. That real people want to go and say, put your drone here and come back tomorrow, it's fixed. That's Louis, what they want.
Give you an idea.
There are simple ones, though. Like, I was going to say,
sorry, Bobby.
They did the motor pods where you just took out 2 screws, the entire motor pod came out. You could buy another motor pod and drop it straight in. So there were some of the parts where you could literally make them plug and play replacements.
This, just to give you an idea how bad, and this isn't drone, this is DJI, just to give you an idea, right? Gimbal, Ronin. If you lose the camera plate, you can't buy it.
Yes, you can.
No, you can't. That is not Louis. I ran the Facebook group.
Sorry,
no, you can't.
Sorry. Do you want to buy how many? I can send you by Amazon tomorrow I have Amazon Prime.
You cannot get the camera plate from DJI for the Ronin series. So that just gives you an idea of where. I'm singling out DJI here because they're bad. They're really bad for this. And, I was one of the people that run their Facebook groups for years and put up with people shouting about this. And the drone industry is heading for a bit of a war on this if it's not careful. So I'm just intrigued where manufacturers are going to go.
I think people ask me all the time, for example, gimbal covers.
Yeah.
Stephen Baxley of Airworks is watching this. I hope you received your gimbal covers. If not, please let me know. There are certain parts like, we got them, we'll send it to you. Like, of course. There is this other challenge of, and this is basically, and I don't want to delve too much into our customer service, but like, essentially what we need when you do a claim is we need your flight log, okay? The flight log tells us everything. The flight log tells us if it was the drone's fault or if it was operator fault. And that is something that like, that's the basis of this, right? Now, let's think of it from like a perspective. Like there's a reason why people don't want to sell drones through like Costco or Walmart in some ways, because you get a lot of returns. Who has to deal with those returns? The OEM. So it's actually like a huge challenge to deal with this stuff. We pride ourselves in having phenomenal support. They're all based in the United States, up in our Seattle office, where HQ is. If you need specific parts, the challenge comes down to, and this is where, in my opinion, I think it's the right to repair thing. And I have tried to replace the screen on an iPhone multiple times. I can tell you I've only been successful twice. As a result, I messed up. I had to buy it to go to the Apple store anyway. Right now, fortunately, for whatever reason, Apple had a process to be like, oh man, you messed this up. You're still under warranty. You pay $180 and you can get a new screen. We aren't Apple in terms of, and no drone company has that type of like overhead or resources to repair a drone. So we believe as a company, like, and I, without delving too much of this, Autel as a whole, we're a huge proponent of right to repair. Like our other business, which is quite successful, really hinges on based on this. Yeah. We're an advocate of this. There's this element, and ultimately, I don't know about our owner's opinion on this, et cetera, but like automotive is much more mature than when it comes to drones. My mother had her neighbor replace the alternator in her car that went out because she didn't want to pay a mechanic. The neighbor actually knew how to replace it. Okay. I probably don't know anybody within 20 miles of me. I'd say 10 miles of me, with the exception of like Alex Klimai, who designed the Skynode, who knows how to replace ESCs in a drone. Not anybody within 10 miles of my house, besides one dude, probably knows how to do this. That is a challenge. Now, eventually, and again, someone asked about like the schematics and whatnot, like, those are important. Of course, we want to show how to repair a product. There's also certain things about our product, and as you'll learn, if you fly, and this is not to be disparaging, you fly a Autel or a DJI product, fly another competitor's product. It's an entirely different user experience. And this, again, not a bad thing, but just entirely different user experience. So that tightness of the integration, right? That user experience, because of how tightly we integrated everything. When we open the schematics and we offer these things, we want to ensure, like, so we have in the past considered working with, like, how Apple has preferred and authorized like service centers, etc. I believe DJI has something like that as well. I can tell you from experience, and this is not like to throw shade at distributors, some of them are really good at this, some of them are not at all. How do you choose who, and again, how do you choose the right ones? How do you ensure that they, it's something that we're looking at to explore. Short and simple. We support right to repair.
A contract for you, Bobby? I can draft you a contract for those guys.
Yeah, no, certainly we can chat more about this. It's just eventually there's like we're gonna have to comply.
Yeah, and everyone does. Yeah,
Bobby,
and this is the thing.
Metrics. You have
the thing is,
to get metrics on everything, and
look, the computer industry has been dealing with this for years. You can buy an $800 graphics card and you are perfectly entitled to strip it, replace all of the heat thermal compound and pads, and they still have to honor that warranty because they tried for years to prevent you, and they got themselves kicked to pieces in court. And now the warranty void sticker on the back of a graphics card is pointless. It means nothing. From my point of view, what I'm looking at is where companies really, it's going to become a big thing for the whole industry in electronics, and it's gaining more and more traction. And really, for me, this is about, you know, a DJI dealer will not even sell me a part. So the company who is allowed to do the repair are not even allowed to sell me the part as well. And it's just, I think it's going to be something that manufacturers have to start taking on board of how they're viewed in this, if you get what I mean. And yes, okay, you know.
I agree. One, to make a comparison with computers, which I think is actually, I compare drones to enterprise IT all the time.
Yeah.
One of the challenges is because, like, a server cab, it's standardized how wide it is and the different U thickness of the different blades. You have things like standardized power, USB. We don't really have that yet for drones. I think the closest thing is literally Mavlink. Once this starts to be, again, and I think that Philip has done a phenomenal job, and same with the other folks at the open source community, of being like, yeah, we got to use CAN bus. Yeah, let's use I2C, and these are the pins we're going to use. Again, eventually there'll be more and more standards like this. I actually think that remote ID, I know some of you don't like it. The fact that ASTM is actually willing to create a standard for the UAV industry is massive, is one step in the right direction. So, for example, if the industry can agree that motors need 3 wires, which I would argue, I think for the most part they do, but there's some companies that add that 4th one for telemetry, which that's what the ESC is for, right? Once we can get some understanding, I think right to repair will become much more prolific. And I actually think that this is going to, in the future, and again, it's not I'm not going to disparage any of the open source community. I think they make a phenomenal product. I built my career helping work on this stuff. At the same time, there's a level of experience, cognitive load, expertise that's required to build these types of products. I mean, I mentioned Mission Planner briefly, and I don't want to be rude. That thing is a pain in the ass to use. Okay, I have colleagues who have master's degrees in computer engineering who are befuddled by how to set it up. Right?
Needs more parameters.
There, sorry, Bobby. You can submit your PRs and change it.
No, this is true, right? No, for example, we can. There's just this extra step of doing that. And when you're a drone company who is just, oh man, I got to build this thing to meet the needs.
Come on, it's a full ladder. It's not one step. It's a full ladder. Do the build.
Yeah, it takes multiple steps, and so, and what I view the open source industry as really nurturing this entire enterprise IT like ecosystem. It'll be with, my opinion, third-party software where commercial off-the-shelf airframes will play and work in the same space through the same interface even as PX4 and autopilot. And this is where, like, I mean, it's kind of a weird thing because I've been attempting to try and chat with, I have the utmost respect. If there's not a company I would bet my money on more than the team at Auterion. I have enormous amounts of respect for them. I also understand like how the company works, right? And so in theory, what's stopping a Chinese company from employing, I don't know, 200 engineers, paying them all pennies on the dollar to contribute to the PX4 code base? And then all of a sudden you get to control the PX4 roadmap. Like there's so many vulnerabilities in the industry that like doesn't seem to make sense. And everybody's trying to like play offense when they just need to not just play defense, just collaborate. Because ultimately, like these are geopolitical, like these are way bigger things, bigger beyond the industry. And even DI is bigger than DIU, bigger than, CASA, bigger than all of these folks. These are like huge issues. You mentioned something about Apple. Apple is the most valuable company on the face of the earth. They probably couldn't do it without leveraging Chinese labor, right? They couldn't do it without Foxconn. And I will say this like again and again, like if you want to compete with a Chinese company, like you'll never beat them on price. You have to beat them on a feature set. You have to beat them on user experience. And right now, like we can agree, like DJI is really good at that. DJI not only beats you on price, they have a phenomenal user experience. They have an SDK that was helped develop by former Apple employees. Like it's robust. It has chops. People use it. I view a world where drones integrate. I believe that Mavlink has an opportunity to like be an integral part of this. What I believe, and I think that you will see in the next couple of years, I don't need to use the Sky node. I don't need to use the Blue Cube. I don't need to use a number of things to run APM or PX4. Like I would love to.
It's what I've been wanting to ask you for a while, and I want to get it out before I forget. You mentioned with the use, and I think this is the right way of doing it, and I think 3DR started this with the Solo, and they did the flyaway warranty, and I know DJI do it now, which is you take the user's logs and you determine whether it was user error or not. One thing I don't think you get with DJI is to be able to properly view those logs yourself, because the one thing that was good with Solo, which is true of Argicopter as a whole, is people would try and argue, even when they were told, no, it was your fault with what you did with the drone. They go, no, it wasn't. And they would put the logs online, and because everyone could read the logs, there's nothing better than peer review. So then everyone would load it and then look at logs and go, you complete lemon, you did this or you did that. And there was nothing better than actually even defending the manufacturers. It actually took workload away from them, because the community itself, if you could actually view your own log files, there's a tool there to do it, which it was going through Mission Planner and you play it back. That actually, as well, it saves you a bit of cost, because things don't necessarily end up with your support, because people will ping them off the peers first or check themselves. And I just wondered if with your logs, you provide any tools to the users to analyze them themselves, or you keep it all in-house. Because the trouble is, if you keep it all in-house, there's that suspicion as well. It's like, well, you've told me I did something wrong, but you've got all the tools, so you could actually be lying. You could actually have a software bug that you don't want to admit.
It's a very good point. So currently they are only viewed by us. We're in the process. In a future firmware update, we will have a separate version of logs that are in a universal format that is semi-standardized and being used by no other companies. Yes, you can analyze the logs yourself, but also you can use those logs to say, use for like way better integrations. So more about like the standards and like formats that are being used by other companies. We're looking to do that as well. The one thing that I can tell you that Autel is very proud about is our flight control software. It's our own, and it isn't PX4 and it's not APM. I can tell you we're getting it to work with Mavlink, to receive Mavlink commands. So there's this perception of that, cool, I can use a Mavlink enabled GCS to control my Autel drone. Great. Why wouldn't you buy our product? And there's this, you mentioned when DJI was unwilling to do a lot of things. We are willing to do everything. And that's the one thing. And again, that's the one thing that I don't think that the industry understands in this particular case.
Hey, Bobby,
like
watch out with everything, because you might be asked something that you don't want to do. So,
well, there are already things that we don't want to do. Which we already said, yes, we're willing to do it, because you have to. It's just a reality. There's this bill that's being. Sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, I shouldn't have jumped on you then. But I wanted to know with because it struck me that one of the problems, even in the UK government, Brenden was grilled on this. In fact, there's probably 2 points on this actually with regards to yourself. But the first one was, he thinks, which I think is probably going to slip my mind now that I started thinking about the second one. I'll go on the second one first. It popped into my mind because it was up here in the comments as well. Was am I right to think you don't have the no-fly zones? Because if you don't, that's going to create you problems in Europe. Because one thing with MPs, members of Parliament here in the UK, is especially after Gatwick, which likely wasn't a drone anyway. But that aside, the narrative has made it so that it is seen as absolute essential that you have no-fly zones. And if your drone doesn't, then you're essentially giving people a backdoor. So is that going to change your mind at some point to implement them?
So we currently notify people, hey, man, you're in this airspace. You should not fly. We do tell people their airspace. We don't prevent people from flying their drone.
Okay, I mean, I don't mind that. I mean, 3DR took that approach. It was a case of, we will tell you, you'll be treated as an adult, and if you choose to ignore that, that's on you, and then obviously that could be used against you by the authorities anyway. The question that was in my mind, actually, this is where DJI got caught on as well, was the fact that their data was going off to China. does that mean that for your US products, you will have servers in the US and it will stay there, and likewise in Europe, or not?
So to clarify, currently all of our services in the United States. So all like Auto Robotics, you call us on the phone. Our service department is in Bothell, Washington.
Yeah, that it was any logs, anything that the drone collects and communicates back. Will that be on a US server as opposed to a Chinese server?
So as of like several months ago, all data actually by Autel Drones is hosted on AWS in Los Angeles. We even have, for certain customers, have AWS GovCloud. So so for extra scrutiny and security, obviously it costs more expensive. There's only certain customers that even have those types of needs. So yes, it'll all be done stateside.
I don't remember the press release for that.
And there is, regarding like geofencing. So almost every drone OEM, good ones who make their own hardware, have the ability to do geofencing and enforce geofencing. There's a liability to that. As you're probably aware, the DJI app, the FAA isn't the one managing their airspace. It's DJI. DJI has, I think, a relatively small team managing this stuff. A lot of our business comes from customers who say, man, I love the DJI, but I love your product because it takes off every time I need it to. We have big customers, like the largest media companies in the world, using our products. SpaceX uses the Autel Evo to inspect the drone to inspect their spaceship on the landing pad before takeoff, right? There's a robustness there that our products allow for. That extra flexibility, and this is, okay, in the far distant future where all the drones are autonomous and UTM is enabled, remote ID and all this stuff, we'll just say in the future, and the FAA controls this geofencing. Sure, I'm sure there's a way where will be able to, in real time, prevent you from flying a drone in a certain area. We don't really have an incentive to doing that type of stuff per se. We just tell people, and this is something that came from the owner of the company, Frank himself. I don't like telling people where they can fly their drone, like when to fly their drone or not. You inform them, and that's it. And ultimately, like, to be fair, yes, these products are easy to fly. They're not for children. Yeah, they cost as much as an Xbox. They're not for children. So
just one point, Bob, because it's one you keep going on, and I'm getting a certain vibe from a few things you've said that'll upset a lot of people. So I just want to get it out there so you know
yes, please.
To it. I get the impression that you are positive and warm and cuddly to the idea of UTM over telecoms, because I think that is the most evil, awful, terrible future for drones. And I know Philip thinks the same on this as well, because all the telecoms want it. All the telecoms companies are pushing out all the scare stories about drones, all that horrendous nastiness of fear drones, because they want this UTM future. And you don't have to have UTM managed over telecoms. You don't have to have it centralized. You can have the drones. I mean, everyone hated DJI's drone idea, but everyone now is realizing it is the lesser of all the evils, because drones can be communicating, I'm a drone here, this is information about me. Other drones can be picking that up, and they can all deconflict themselves locally. They don't have to have any mobile phone connection at all to do that. So I just wanted to getting the feeling that you think that's good and it'll be welcomed. I don't think it will be welcomed.
But how can you make money out of that? You can't make money out of it. UTMs are a great way to make money. You can't make money out of self-deconflicting drones.
But I mean, I'm very much, I've seen it through the US people concerned, and this concern comes all the way to the UK of the likes of AirMap. I mean, AirMap are getting friendly, and it's only come out because of Freedom of Information request with the airspace regulator over here. They even got the CEO that used to work for NATS here as some advisor for AirMap, and that thing really worries me. That when you
don't forget they flew the Gatwick guy across to have a little meeting with his family
and
as well.
And their tweet that they deleted.
Yes, about taxation. So yeah, really, AirMap wants to use this as a form of taxation, and they want to heap huge costs on the end user. They will say to the governments, you don't have to worry about all the costs of these systems because you can put that on the users, and we're going to collect you tax. And the government.
That's what Google says. That's Google's submission. Google's submission to the New Zealand government was exactly that. You won't have to pay a bean. We will put the costs on the users.
Yeah. So I'll let you continue with that, but that's our concern.
So my opinion, and I like, UTM is unmanned or universal traffic management. I view it as an incremental process. And like, I don't mean like 5 years, I mean like 20 years, right? Like Tesla's full self-driving is, like level 2 autonomy, maybe level 3. This is all like very future like facing. I view UTM, and again, my opinion is that so like one of my passions is FPV. It's one of the reasons how I found Nicola's side, and I've been following Bruce for many years. Reviews on Foxeer cameras and the hardware. Like I think I probably watched every video of yours ever from when you started to like 2019. Like truthfully.
And he still hasn't finished the one on bloody Dragon Link either.
Yeah,
and I think he needs years.
I think Bobby needs some serious help.
So no, I mean, and I think Raphael Perker is one of the most innovative people, like Trappy from Team Black Sheep, in the entire hobby. And he has I would say, I think his own views on UTM are similar to, I think, those echoed here. There is this other perspective of that, like me going and flying drones at the park is a privilege in some ways. And I worry that that window of opportunity is closing. And I understand this idea of like the idea of my rights being infringed on, et cetera. Admittedly, so one of my early business partners, a guy named Bob Rugi, who Kebab FPV kind of invented the toothpick. So I've been flying the ultralights for actually the first FPV drone I ever bought was some Australian folks, Rotor X, their Atom airframe. And Martin and those folks, Martin and Dan, and their actually engineer Ryan Labar, he now is like the lead engineer on the First Eyes port and whatnot. Like, they've got some real legs in the space. At a very early period in time, it's like, and this, the ability to go fly this around like on the street, in the park, and the window is closing. Now, whether or not, and so from Autel's perspective, is as regulations are meant to enhance and help the drone industry. If they don't do that, then they're doing a disservice, not just to the consumers, but also to the OEMs as well. Now, there's my opinion on UTM, and it's kind of a slippery slope, is that there's this like overlap between things that carry people and things that carry bags of chips and coffee and things that carry nothing, right? They all want to be managed in the same system. The reality is that the threat and the amount of safety precautions needed for these are variable. So people don't know this, but we'll be releasing a parachute solution by the end of the year with a partner, which will allow for operations over flights over people. That aircraft, yes, there's a parachute. Contrary to popular belief, not a single drone, not a single airframe has been type certified by the FAA yet, at all. Everybody's trying to get waivers, making the most reliable airframe out there. I think that this idea of UTM and this pay-to-play type of, you reserve the airspace, will eventually be kind of like the express lane where you have, in Utah, if you have an electric car or a hybrid, et cetera, you're able to fly in the carpool or drive in the carpool lane with one operator, or you can pay. And I think that there's this notion of, cool, if you want to do this and fly here, you will eventually have to pay. In my opinion, I think that there's a lot of speculation as to how the airspace will be divided up. I believe that the telecom companies are actually competing with companies like Google very directly, and they have very, very diametrically opposed positions. And I can't speak to what's happening in New Zealand or Australia, for example, but there's little to no centralized airspace awareness or management utility for governments out there, period. And I think they like to do that. So this thing I mentioned, the supplemental data service provider within UTM. So you have drone service providers, and you have these SDSPs. It could be micro weather. It could be ground-based counter drone sensors, right? That are extracting this data and then feeding all, which then drone service providers pay for to get access to, right? At a certain fee. Again, these costs have been set up to, but it's similar to how you can currently see traffic or weather patterns, et cetera, and for free observe the flow of traffic in a community using a number of different sensors. UTM plans on doing this. I cannot, and again, I have truthfully, admittedly, have very good things to say about the team at AirMap in the sense that they're have created for at least American customers. Let me just clarify it. For American customers, I can't speak about what's happening overseas because I'm an American. I operate here. The laws that impact us are so different than the laws that impact you folks disproportionately.
I just get just jump in there. I read forums of people in the US, and AirMap is universally hated in the drone community. They have lobbied.
No
They have lobbied. They have scaremongered. Their first business pre-AirMap was called No Fly Zone or No Fly Drone, and specifically marketed fear, saying drones are above you. You need a no-fly zone above your house. And so that the very core of what they've ever always been about has been about negatively reflecting drones, monetizing airspace to make huge profits for their pockets. And that isn't changing and never going to change. And that's my fear. And this idea of governments having a central idea of everything flying is not a good thing, because then it will be councils will say, oh, there's 10 people that use our park. Great, we can tax them. We can say you're not flying on that park unless we charge you £10 and so on. And then suddenly all your rights are eroded because everything becomes about money. There's this assumption that everyone flying a drone is pocketing huge amounts of money for every photo they take and so on.
Yeah, agreed.
And that's already happening without UTM being there. There's all this money grab. You know, in the UK, you can't fly near the shores of Dover. It's land where you've to pay £250 per hour or something daft. So people have to seek further away to take off so they can film something, come back, and it's that kind of malarkey. And the moment you've got people looking at the data, there's going to be no other end game than just a lot more fees, a lot more exclusion. And none of that's about safety. Safety can all be managed locally with the drones. This is purely about people lining their pockets with money.
So I can only speak. I know that AirMap has had different direction changes, different changes in leadership since their founding. We at Autel, we're in the process of integrating with Lance partners. So the idea is that, you can immediately authorize airspace quickly and rapidly. Now, you're still going to be able to take off no matter what. They'll still give you the flexibility to operate. My own opinion on UTM, and it's actually not from Autel, it comes from the counter drone side. So a lot of the customers who are interested in counter drone are in the UTM business. And there's this overlap, and this is to be fair. And I'm not, maybe the FAA is a better person to talk to about this, but when there are large drones that carry groups of people being managed by the same system as drones that are taking photos for real estate, there's a perception that has to be as robust. Both are held to the same standard. I personally don't agree with that, because my opinion is that the airframes that are meant to carry people will likely be type certified, will likely be held to a different standard, airworthiness, etc. They will also more likely operate at different altitudes. So do you remember I'm only 34 years old. I remember when the internet first came out and the perceptions of the internet early on of what it would be like and how there'd be certain types of control, etc. Not a lot of those panned out in the same way. Now, unfortunately, we do have something, to be fair. We have certain laws in the United States that allow telecom companies to have access to your data, that have allowed for, it's of questionable intent. Neither here nor there. When it comes to UTM, my opinion is that we have a very long way to go before any of these aircraft are able to carry people and have real meaningful services. And I say this, okay, most of the people, and I know this, most of the industry had bet on network remote ID being selected. And when it wasn't, there was panic. I know the folks at Matterport were betting on it. I know the folks at Skyward were betting on it. I know many, many other people were very, very, sorry, Matternet, not Matterport. Matterport makes a phenomenal immersive camera, which I recommend. There's just, again, there's this idea of, I hate to say this too, because I've learned this the hard way. Perception is a huge thing in this industry, right? And this is the one thing about Autel, we don't do a lot of marketing. We spend very, very little on marketing. We don't.
Well, that's the interesting thing. Well, there's two stories that your PR people haven't sent me. You haven't sent me the gear being used on Elon's rockets, and you haven't sent a press release about your data provisioning. So yeah,
yes.
I mean,
so the data provisioning.
Please do. Please just send me. It costs you nothing. It costs you nothing. No one will read it, but it costs you nothing.
No, I appreciate you. Well, for example, the SpaceX opportunity. It was something that we had actually discussed, and we realized, like, man. So SpaceX told us, man, we don't do marketing. We don't do partnerships.
Fair enough.
We just don't do that. And out of respect for the company, because they said that, I actually asked some of the team members, would you be offended if I posted on my LinkedIn? Absolutely not. If you could keep it to your LinkedIn, that would be ideal, and not the company's LinkedIn. Because there are, to be fair, many companies who do that. They go ahead and they will take. The other thing about our data being stored. This is probably the first time we've been public about this. And it's because in the last couple of weeks, especially the feedback I got from commercial UAV, there's this huge misconception that your data goes to China and is analyzed by the Chinese government, et cetera. And even if that were true, okay, and this is like, talk to anybody who works in the intelligence community, foreign governments know more about Americans because of our social media habits and the other products that we use, right? Whether it's TikTok or Instagram or Facebook or like Tinder, I mean, all sorts of things, right? The ability for other governments to learn about Americans. And the security leak was the result of US federal military forces using a DJI drone that revealed a secret base in somewhere in Africa, I believe. And the flight logs showed that. And that was the problem. So we are in the process at Autel, in the process of rebranding, not the company, but our messaging behind our products, because people don't know this. During the pandemic, we sold more product than anybody besides DJI from a commercial, like with no marketing during the pandemic. You have companies that have raised hundreds of millions of dollars that have poured half of that into marketing. They can't ship enough product in time. So the question is what can we do to actually, we try very hard to never overpromise, underdeliver. We are very big on providing like flight times, capabilities, et cetera, that like are accurate and meet the needs of the customers. And for a number of different reasons, we haven't gone through and you'll see this over the next couple of months, our marketing will change. You're going to see more influencer marketing, for example.
I'm glad you said that, because DJI have dropped that, and then look at the videos for DJI have just gone away.
And when does mine arrive? I'm waiting at the door now.
Yeah. But this is something that is important because, like, I forgot Dustin Dunhill, the gentleman that sends the drones out like to meet their doom. I would watch every single one of his videos on the drone I was looking to buy because I wanted to make sure I had a good control link. These anecdotal, again, these are all anecdotal types of videos, right? They're not, the number has a software-defined radio and measuring RSSI, et cetera. But man, he flew 4 miles and didn't lose connection, and it came back and landed right where it is. That just observation. Same with everything that Bruce has done. Like, I don't need to see the actual specs. I got to see that it manufactures delight in a guy who knows what he's talking about, who's been doing this for 10, 20 years, builds trust in me as a customer. And there's this other element of like, so people don't know this. There's one of the earlier directors of marketing at Autel started his own extremely successful smart home company. If you do some Googling, you'll figure it out. And he is like this wizard at marketing. And what's unique about his product, and he's told me this, is like, man, like smart home tech is not, like it's been out there, it's much more commodified than drones. And what you're able to, the way you are able to shape and manufacture delight in your customers is very, very different. And Autel has never scratched the surface of that. I think some of the best marketing in the entire industry is done by Skydio, who demonstrate how good of a drone it is at following people. And I told the Skydio team at Commercial VXO when we were all playing blackjack together. Friends ask me, what drone do I need when I go dirt biking, when I go skiing? I grew up in the mountains of Utah, so I have friends who are professional skiers, mountain bikers. Buy the Skydio. It's great. You're going to love it for what it does. And this type of like transparency and authenticity about us as a company and also like our competition, I think is actually helpful. I think Randall, what's one of the things that I will be very grateful for is the authenticity that he actually brought to the brand that the rest of us are carrying through. Is that you can rely on our product and you know exactly what it's supposed to do. And there are certain things about obviously, we are not a perfect company. We are looking to improve our entire service process, RMA process. We are going to enhance not only our enterprise offerings, but start to delve into more of like the federal and defense market as well, which is a huge focus for the company. And
yeah, sorry, I was going to stop. I've just seen the time. We've been here 2 hours.
Yeah, you can grill me for all you want. Yeah, no.
I have, well, what do I want to say? I'm not going to put it as eloquently as you're talking. Sorry?
I said there was.
Oh, Brenden, no, well, we'll talk about that next week. Let's talk about that next week, because I think immediately you've been upfront and honest with us. And we haven't pulled any punches. We've not softened any questions, and we haven't provided, as we never do to anyone. We never provide questions up front because we always just make it up. But no, we don't. We never prime anyone.
I've got a couple of tough ones.
Go on. Go for a couple of tough ones, and we better go.
Bobby, I can't see you on Twitter. Are you actually on Twitter?
No, I'm not on Twitter. I created a profile maybe 12 years ago, and I probably have like 3 tweets on it, and they're from don't look me up. They're like all political. They're all like, I think they were all to the Trump or the Bush administration. Like they're from that long ago.
Can we ask that you do get on Twitter? Because Bruce didn't used to be on Twitter, and after some arm twisting,
he's changed his life.
Yeah,
changed Bruce's life.
I've heard mixed things. They said if you value your mental health, you'll stay off of social media. So,
yes.
LinkedIn is kind of what I've been, and unfortunately, I believe that LinkedIn has devolved into like Twitter for adults with income.
Yes, I mean with Twitter, I mean, end of the day, you've come across okay. It's just talking about some forwards. If you're thick-skinned, it's okay. If someone's just giving you aggro, you just ignore them. If you have to, block them. But I think it's better to just ignore them. But I mean, I think Twitter overall, for people in the drone community chatting, that it's been really good to get a handle on people and share information and so on. So at least have a think about it.
I will for sure.
The secret is I only follow 8 people, and then it's fine. Don't follow all the hundreds of thousands of people these people follow.
And if you see me on this, like just send me a DM on LinkedIn. If it's related to work, like I'm happy to help you, point you in the right direction. If I don't have the answer, I can try to connect you to somebody who does.
That's what I can for grown-ups, eh?
A follow-on. Obviously, we'd started the program on here, and we put. I don't know if you can read it or not, but anyway, Brenden this week when he'd left, he couldn't say out prior, but he has come out publicly and said, given the freedom of information that have come out since and so on, that he doesn't believe there was a drone with Gatwick. Philip Rouse has gone on the record. It's not out there yet, but it will be in the register, I think, tomorrow. So it'd be good to hear from you at some point, Bobby. Probably not fair to ask you now without you actually reading the data, but if you have a look at after this video afterwards, the link in it, and read the revelations that have come out since, it'd be nice to have more voices in the drone industry coming out and speaking about the narrative there, because it has shaped regulation. It's continuing to shape regulation, and it will do over the coming years, unless the drone industry starts really, defending itself a bit better. Because at the moment, any accusation that's thrown with no evidence, really the industry kind of has rolled over far too often.
It's interesting in the submissions to the New Zealand government over the new regulations, many people lambasted our Ministry of Transport for even raising the spectre of Gatwick because of the way it's just rubbish. And that actually came home pretty hard when you read through the submissions.
Okay, so regarding, I brought back like this cultural thing, and I think Bruce, you've mentioned this as well. How Americans, and one of my former bosses at White Fox, his name is Andy D'Ambrosio. He's actually, I think, one of the single most business savvy people in the entire industry. A lot of experience. It's like, listen, we don't live in a trusting society as Americans. We just lack trust. We lack public trust, but also trust with one another, and that shapes a lot of our decision making as a culture, etc. So, I spent quite a bit of time living in North Idaho, which is like probably the most well-armed place in America, also the most racially homogenous. And talking with people who viewed guns, but they saw me fly my drones. I can't tell you how many times people said, "Man, I'm going to shoot that out of the sky if it comes over my house." I'm like, "Man, thanks for telling me, but do not shoot the drone out of the sky because it is a federal offense. I'm not going to do anything about it, but you can go to jail for 5 years and have a $20,000 fine, etc." And again, this type of interaction is important. And I will relate that to Gatwick and this idea of trust, because when you fly over a drone over somebody's house, people have this fear and perception of their privacy being invaded, particularly in the United States. I will tell you that within the counter drone industry, Gatwick comes under quite a bit of scrutiny, because all the things that we look for and we ask about the drone, right? RF transmissions, other types of things, forensics associated with drones, they don't tend to stick out in the same way. That isn't to say, now I can be fair with you, there have been a number of drone instances in the United States that are not reported, that drone systems have failed to react to, or they picked up false positives, etc. The challenge and my worry about Gatwick, because there is so much data now that asserts kind of what you folks have been insinuating, that I know Philip and others had said since day one, there's no way it could be a drone, undermines the counter UAS industry, undermines the need for this technology, and ultimately makes it perceived as like some fear mongering, etc.
It doesn't actually, though. If you read the information, it's actually the opposite. It's affirming the counter drone technology was correct and should have been listened to. So what effectively happened at Gatwick was the counter drone technology was brought in, multiple brands tested before. They said there is no drone here. People that were seeing it were believed instead. So people were being told there's a drone about. They were seeing lights all after sunset. And they were saying, "I've seen a drone." And what was happening instead was the airport was being closed down for people seeing it, and the counter drone technology was ignored. And what we were saying was, that's stupid. A, why bring in an asset and ignore it? And B, it never added up. We should have said in the first place, these site, it was one of the police officer that was overseeing the what did they call operation at the time, had even said to the press, when there might not have been a drone, and then he was removed that very same day for saying that. So it was either a senior officer above him, or it was political pressure from the government because they thought it was embarrassing. But really what they should have said was, we've not encountered what we thought was a drone incursion at an airport before. We weren't quite prepared. We've learned the lessons, and everyone could have walked away from it with their heads held high, counter drone industry, police, and everyone. But instead, it was basically everything was hush hush. They wouldn't even acknowledge which counter drone systems were there, so it's taken it all to come out in the wash for that information to come out. Instead, it was just held on to this very day that people saw the drone, and that was it, period. It was seen. And literally, there isn't even a written description of what it looks like. So that's come out freedom of information. Not even
an official written description.
I guess all I can say is, someone made a post about this kind of that alludes to it. I think there's a lot of things that have occurred in the last several years, and we'll see, especially in the last 5, because drones are well known, that people confuse for drones. They just don't know what it is. And it's very obvious. I'm not like one of these, I'm not trying to pull a tinfoil hat or whatever else, but I live in Utah. I spend a lot of time camping in southern Utah. There's a lot of bizarre sightings of things that I've witnessed firsthand, of things, that don't seem to make a lot of sense. Now, to be fair with you, at the time I had seen them, had I known that there was some sort of drone, like a OcuSync enabled airframe, mind you, this is 10 years ago, that had the ability to turn a spotlight on and move in these different, maybe I would think it's a drone, right? Again, we don't know. There's a speculation. The one thing that I'm concerned about with this counter drone technology is that Gatwick may undermine the actual utility of the technology. So, for example, music venues and stadiums. Prior to working at White Fox, I actually sold D-drone technology to music festivals, and there was also a a other counter drone company that doesn't exist anymore that would send a much larger drone with a net. And I can tell you that the head of security at Lollapalooza, I'll never forget this. He says, wait a second, you're telling me that there's a drone with a bomb flying over a crowd of people, and you're going to send a bigger drone with a net gun to catch it and fly it to a safe space? And the guy at the D-drone said, yeah, absolutely. Or he was actually an integrator for D-drone. Yes, absolutely. The guy on the phone was like, yeah, all right, right. And you could hear the absurdity in the guy's voice, the incredulity as to his ability to feel like, how is this technology really going to keep us safe? It's matured quite a bit since then. So I believe, like, I'm not worried about a terrorist attack, right? But if you have a concert and somebody flies a drone over it, it's not authorized, that concert's shutting down. And you just lost X amount of thousands of dollars if it's your show, right? Or if it's again, there's value to counter drone technology. It's really not, I mean, it's more about like keeping it, it's more about, yes, preventing hooliganism or misuse, etc. And there is the edge case. And this is the one thing that I want to bring up. And this is like where we in the counter drone, well, I'm no longer in it, but the counter drone industry, there will be, unfortunately, at one point in our life, I hate to say this, another horrible terrorist attack, likely being used by this type of technology at one point. And when that happens, there's going to be this massive overreaction from municipalities, from the federal government, from every single entity about how do you regulate this technology and how was it available, right? Brenden Schulman said something very valid to me. He's like, man, this whole anti-Chinese thing doesn't even make a lot of sense, because what if a Chinese operative used a blue UAS airframe to commit an act of terrorism? What then, right? And it actually really, and not to quote him, I shouldn't be quoting him without his permission, but it really made me think of something about, it really comes down to the intent of the people who access this technology. It's not the tech itself that's the problem. It's the intent of the people who have access to it. Now, I'm not saying that you need to have there shouldn't be a register. Like, please still sell the drones at Best Buy. They should be available. Educate the customer. And which is, again, it's a challenge. And it's something that I think drone OEMs need to do a better job of articulating. Because, like, again, we tell you, you're in restricted airspace. We don't automatically adjust your, like, out of the box, the drone is limited to a very low altitude in beginner mode. We don't let you fly 400 feet immediately. But it doesn't, we don't automatically, if you're a certain amount of airspace, the settings don't go automatically reduce the altitude. Like, we're not this big brother of a company. And I think there's just this, again, because of where the company's based and this, the different regulations as to where the technology comes from, people don't, it's different. And I say this with respect to my fellow Americans. We abuse every damn right we have. We just do that, whether it's the Second Amendment, the First Amendment, number of them. We're abusive by nature. We just love to push. And if you look at our cars, our vehicles, our trucks, how we modify them, like, there's an element of, like, we just love to push the envelope just a little bit, and we don't like being told what to do. And that's okay.
But isn't that strange that in the USA now they're having regulations that prohibit you from modifying your engine, prohibit you from adding performance improvements to your vehicle because of environmental concerns? You're being the most regulated. They're becoming the most regulated country in the world. Where the land of the free and the home of the brave is far more regulated than I think most people in this country would accept.
I think it's all US except California. California is where they start all those crazy regulations.
This is,
I don't know.
there are a number of those, and my own opinion, and this is just like objective, is that this country, America is a phenomenal place to start business. Our freedoms prompt a sense of innovation. It's a big part of our culture. The Second Amendment, like, I'll admit, I joke, I don't own any guns because everybody in my neighborhood owns one. I don't need to own guns. I have no need, etc. Right? And this is a very, very it's a very touchy subject, and it's a fine line as to how we view rights in individuals. I view drones from a commerce perspective. They're property that I have purchased, and I own them. And how I regulate the drones, for example, registration, like, in my opinion, I get the point. Is it the FAA isn't even making money off of this $5 registration or $10 registration service, right? It's not really a cash grab. It's just one more check off the box. I do not believe. I personally think that the regulations that happen with drones are politicized in the United States. They're a extension of U.S. foreign policy from prior administrations. Even it is not something
that's worldwide though. There's that it's worldwide. It's political
worldwide
for lots of reasons.
Absolutely,
they make no sense from a safety point of view. I don't mind if we're working towards safety, which is better training, better communication from everybody about what's what. I don't mind that at all, but just rules for rules' sake is nonsense. And ill-conceived stuff. Look, we've been going on way too long. It's
no
2
worries.
hours.
I'll talk with you folks later. Yeah.
Peppermint Pilot, you're still on a warning and you're going early. So you're on 2 warnings now. Just double warning. I do need to get that red card. Look after yourself in Wales and everyone else in the world, wherever you're watching. Look after yourself, stay safe, mask up, wash your hands, all those other good things. Bobby, top talk. Thank you very much indeed. I think you've probably a few people might watch this and think, oh well, maybe I will have a look at Autel now. So you've done them proud there. We'd love to have you back, and thank you very much for being so honest about everything. And Bruce,
thank you so much.
It's a pleasure.
Keep tuned. We got some things announcing at the end of the month that I think some folks will be it's more on the consumer side, but you'll be impressed and pleased, and maybe we can send something to Bruce. Yeah.
Send them on. Send on some press releases. Ian, well done on Gatwick. Louis, you're not driving tonight. Dear viewers, look after yourself wherever you are in the world. We'll see you again, 2100 GMT next week. Bye-bye for now.
Bye.
Bye, guys.